What's up, y'all? This is Vocab Malone. It's been a minute since we've done a Google Live Hangout Shield Squad broadcast, but here we are. Yes, that is Martin Luther in the background, Abu's favorite reformer. All right, y'all, and that's my man laughing right there. Abu, come on, say what's up to the people.
Good evening, and assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi. But
I'm gonna let you introduce this very important topic while you're speaking, brother. What I'm gonna do is start sharing the link across some social media channels. So take your time and kind of watch, and then we'll play some video. But give me a few minutes, if you could, while you introduce this very important topic. So everybody listen up, because we've uncovered some stuff. Or should I say Abu's uncovered some stuff?
Well, I would say that other gentlemen, the research, the much appreciated research of other people have helped us bridge the gap on certain issues and possibly shed some new light on the history of One West.
Yeah, this is big stuff if you understand the overall picture. To some of y'all, it may take a while, but once you see the import of this, I think you'll be glad about this Google Live Hangout. So right now, share this, please. Spread it around. Let people know we are live. Let people know we're up. I know it's late on the East Coast, but you notice when we got put kids to bed. So, yo, share this right now. Begin. And Abu, you start dropping the information about why this is important and kind of what we're going to do tonight while I start sharing this link on social media. Go ahead, bro.
Okay, well, first, to start off right away, because whenever we talk about the One West stream, people always say, oh, you're trying to pigeonhole everybody, you're trying to paint everybody with a wide brush. Just to be clear, our focus here is a very specific realm within the very diverse Israelite spectrum. So this doesn't have to do with everything within the Israelite spectrum, although tonight we will be benefiting from the research of a particular non-One Wester in the case of Uziel Lewy. But tonight we're going to focus on the One West stream, and this is the particular stream that I'm interested in. It's, in my opinion, by far the most visible stream within the Israelite spectrum. When you run into Israelites on the streets in major cities, they're usually from one of these One West splinter groups. The history is interesting, but the history of One West is handed down through basically oral tradition. It's these sort of traditions from people who have been in it for decades. So, you know, stories from people like Yahanna, stories from people like Tahar and others, and there are various students and members of the different groups. And an interesting thing about these stories is a lot of what's sort of central and unique to the One West stream, a lot of it is attributed to Ahrayah, to High Priest Ahrayah, who's always been a member of One West and is currently a high priest within the Israelite Church of God in Jesus Christ. Now, two things that are considered distinct to the One West stream, which it's always been said they go back to Ahrayah, are the 12 tribes chart and Lashon Qadash. Lashon Qadash is the distinct form of Hebrew that you see various Israelite groups using, which is it's essentially modern Israeli Hebrew as far as I'm concerned, grammatically, or basically biblical Hebrew, but it's with little difference, but it's the available vocalizations and phonemes are reduced. So all the vocalizations are just with the exception of ayin, and every Hebrew character is treated as having only one pronunciation, one possible vocalization. Now, so anyway, the 12 tribes chart, the famous or infamous 12 tribes chart, and Lashon Qadash are said to go back to Ahrayah. Some people claim that it came through a revelation, maybe he met an angel or whatever. Others say it was developed through his studies. But whatever the case, the 12 tribes chart and Lashon Qadash come from Ahrayah. I've seen many people say this. The ICGJC used to love telling people, you know, here it is, they would tell the groups that aren't connected to them, the so-called, as they would call them, rebel groups, they would say, you know, here it is, you got that tribes chart, but you stole that from Ahrayah, a man who's in our church. you know, and even the quote unquote rebel groups, the groups that splintered off from One West, would admit the 12 tribes card came from Ahrayah. Same thing with the language. I've seen Tahar say that, quote, without Ahrayah, we wouldn't have the Hebrew. So the significant point here is that through the generally agreed upon oral history of One West, the 12 tribes chart and Lashon Qadash go back to Ahrayah. It all came from Ahrayah. Here's an interesting thing about that. Let's raise a hypothetical question that has sort of been raised by the videos of Uziel Lewi, who I'm going to be mentioning in a second. What if the tribes chart came from Abba Bivens, or at least a precursor to it? What if Lashon Qadash, or a sort of precursor to it, actually came from Abba Bivens? Here's the problem. The men who hand down the history of One West, which, so this could be Tahar, this could be Yahanna, this could be people, you know, still in with the ICGJC, etc., and their various students and everything. These are all men that got the history of One West from Ahrayah. No current One Wester, with the exception of Ahrayah, no living One Wester met Abba Bivens. Yahanna never met Abba Bivens. Tahar never met Abba Bivens. Even people who are no longer with it, like I recall seeing Lahab say that he never met Abba Bivens. So any knowledge of Abba Bivens, with the exception of a few recordings, within the One West stream, it all comes from Ahrayah. And what we're starting to realize, we ourselves, those who are of us who are not part of the One West stream, but are nonetheless trying to get a handle on the history to write about it, what we're realizing is that we just sort of accepted this history as well, because it's the generally understood history amongst all the different groups. But it may be the case that Ahrayah was distorting the history and distorting the historical narrative to reflect better on himself. Things that are attributed to him might not actually originate with him. And that's what we're going to be exploring tonight. What's interesting is a lot of this is going to rest on the videos of Uziel Lewi. I want to put this out there, that a gentleman named Uziel Lewi, you can find his account on YouTube. He's done a number of interviews with non-One West Israelites who knew Abba Bivens, and he's gotten input from them, and what they share sort of puts a different spin on the history. And that's what we're going to try to explore. We're going to look at what evidence is now available to us, and we're also going to try to make sense of it. So there is going to be some attempts to interpret the evidence, and it should be interesting. Also, aside from Lashon Qadash and the tribes chart, another thing we might explore, I would hope to explore, is Bivens' attitude towards the New Testament, which is interesting because even One West's attitude towards the New Testament has evolved. All right. I hope was that helpful, or you need more time?
That's an excellent start. That's an excellent start. Now check it out. We got some people watching. I made a couple of y'all moderators so we can hold it down when things get tight later. Listen, if you're watching, please like the video. Please take the link and share it right now. Please take the link and share it if you could. Everybody, let me, it's on my YouTube channel. I'll put the link on here right now, just in case you want to know. And you just need to add youtube.com to it. Just add youtube.com. So here's the link, everybody. And go ahead. That way we'll have our moderators set up for things later in case things get crazy later. I got a couple of y'all. I just made you moderators. You know who you are. And then also be sure to share that link. We just add youtube.com, please. And like I said, like this video. So we know it's late, but people, they're up late. They can hang with this. We're going to be playing a lot of video tonight, and that's going to be foundational to what we talk about. So be ready for that, and that's going to be some good, powerful stuff. With that, my brother, do you want me to begin with a video right now at this point, now that we've set it up properly?
Sure. I think whatever video you got, share it. Which one?
Well, that's what I was kind of wondering.
I was thinking that video of Yahanna, which is the only video that doesn't come from Uziel Lewi. Excuse me. I hope the gentleman forgives me for mispronouncing his name. Uziel Lewi. The only video that's not from him is this clip of Yahanna, which may have some relevance. It's a good way to open it up because it gives us a better sense of a very brief thing about the history of One West, which can help us set up the rest of these clips, in my opinion, anyway.
I agree. Let me get to that right now. And I'm going to play this. This is going to kind of set a foundation, this video right here, for some of the other things that we're going to talk about later. So listen to this. This is General Yahanna of the current ISUPK, and he talks about what happened in the school when there were some split ups and all of that. And it's important to hear this. This is I only got 40 seconds. Is this a real short clip? Abu? Well, let me play it.
Matthews and them was sitting up in there on Saturday with a sheet over their head praying to the Lord. Bivens was out there battling. He was radical. And when they killed Bivens, then of course it was a whole bunch of power grabbing in the school that Bivens had built. So Masha Yaquab took Yaquab's son Ahrayah, and the three of them came around the corner and rented 1 West 125th Street from Mr. Mills.
All right. Hey, Abu, that's such a short clip. I'd actually like to play it again. But what I want to see is if you can explain it and then tell people what to listen to the second time around, because it's only 36 seconds. Go ahead, bro.
So here's the thing to keep in mind. When people think about the history of 1 West, those who are familiar with it, now I'm not saying everyone thinks of it this way, but a lot of people think of it this way. They think of it as you have Abba Bivens, and then you got 1 West carrying on his teachings. Now, maybe that's accurate, but here's the truth of the matter. 1 West, and I mean 1 West 125th Street, the school that spawned all these other groups, 1 West was not started by Abba Bivens. What happened was he had a school, as Yahanna, you'll hear Yahanna say, around the corner. Now, there's some disputes in the history as to where exactly it was. I got some old timers who knew the old school, and I've seen one guy who claims on Lexington Avenue. But from what I've heard, that aside, from what I've heard, it was at 2036 Fifth Avenue, which is also where Yaquab lived later on in life. But anyway, on Fifth Avenue, right between 125th and 126th, whatever the case, Bivens' school was around the corner. And when Bivens died, there was a power struggle. His students disagreed with each other as to which way to go. And only three of his students went around the corner and started a new school. So this is an important point to keep in mind. What became 1 West doesn't necessarily reflect what Bivens taught. It doesn't necessarily reflect the beliefs of other students of Bivens who didn't go with 1 West. That's the thing to hear. That's the thing to notice, because it sort of concedes that Bivens dies, the school fractures into different factions, and 1 West is created by 3 students in particular: Moshe, Jacob, and Ari, which became Masha, Yaquab, and Ahrayah. All right, go ahead.
Moshe is said to be the reincarnated David.
Yes, later though, I feel fairly confident that's something that came way after Bivens. But yeah.
And so when he broke out later on, his school was called House of David, which actually is where Tahar and Nate later on came out of. And a lot of the schools actually came out of House of David. It's sort of like a pit stop.
Most of these guys, Lions of Israel, that's a Zabak's group, came out of House of Israel. Not Lions of Israel. House of Israel was his thing, and now it's We Got Next, I think. And then there's Lions of Israel came out of House of David, of 14th Street Israelites, maybe, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know, but a lot of these splinter groups came out of the House of David, like you said, GMS, Nathaniel now, who started IUIC, etc.
All right, so I'm gonna play this clip again one more time. Now remember, this is General Yahanna. He's currently in charge of what's called the ISUPK, and he is over people like Tazariak, for example. Tazariak is probably the best well-known member of the ISUPK. But Yahanna's been around a while, so he has a lot of information that's helpful to know about the history of the school, at least his perception of it. Here's what he says.
Matthews and them was sitting up in there on Saturday with a sheet over their head praying to the Lord. Bivens was out there battling. He was radical. And when they killed Bivens, then of course it was a whole bunch of power grabbing in the school that Bivens had built. So Masha Yaquab took Yaquab's son Ahrayah, and the 3 of them came around the corner and rented 1 West 125th Street from Mr. Mills.
Hey, who's Mr. Mills? Do you know?
Well, he says he was some guy who owned a security company, was made a decent amount of money, and he wound up, at least back then in the late 60s, early 70s, he was the owner of the building, 1 West 125th Street. So he knew them because he was from the neighborhood and they were from the neighborhood, and he rented them their first space for what would become the Israeli school and then Israeli Church of Universal Practical Knowledge.
All right. Yeah. So notice that Ahrayah is actually a second generation Hebrew Israelite because his father was in this as well. And so they were part of something back then prior to the Abba Bivens departure of the Commandment Keepers. In the beginning of the video, you hear Yahanna say, Matthews and them was in there with a sheet over their head praying to the Lord. Which is interesting. First of all, he says praying to the Lord. Now, that's interesting, first of all. But second of all, I think the praying to the Lord with a sheet over the head is sort of a mocking way to talk about the prayer shawl that you would maybe see a modern-day Jew wear as well, because the Commandment Keepers had a lot of visual cues as well as theological cues and liturgical cues that they took from mainstream Ashkenazi and Sephardic Judaism. Correct me on any of that if I'm wrong, Abu.
Hold on a second. Sorry about that. You caught me off guard.
Tell me what video to play next, too.
No. What I was gonna say was, yes, that's correct. I'm glad you brought up the Commandment Keepers because also relevant to this discussion. It's something most people know. Bivens wasn't generated in a vacuum. He didn't just like self-create, his doctrines entirely. Rather, he's a product of the Commandment Keepers. That's going to come up again later in this video. So he came out of the Commandment Keepers, and in that clip, Yahanna mentions the Commandment Keepers because he's contrasting the two. Bivens is someone who left the Commandment Keepers and started this thing. I actually wanted to, on the whole rabbinic front, I just wanted to share a picture, unless you got it, that picture of Ahrayah and Bivens, and it came up way back in July of 2016. Oh, you got it. If you could show it, that'd be great.
No, actually, I want to show this too. There's a picture of the Commandment Keepers. Right there is Matthews. Everybody can see that. We'll get into this later again. But yeah, if you talk, I'll find it because I do have it ready to go. Actually,
okay, if you got it, yeah,
ready.
I can also I can save it and I can show it within seconds as well.
All right, I'm gonna share it right now, bro. All right, ready?
Yep, ready.
All right, here it is. Boom. That's
Oh, yep, there it is.
Yeah. Now,
so this is I got a clearer shot somewhere, but yeah, that's so. Yeah, it would take me a second to get it. At least let me see if hold on. I think I just downloaded it.
Let me explain the two people I know who they are. There's Abba Bivens on the I guess what's the far right. He has the dark beard as well as it appears he's holding something. If you look in his left hand, I guess that would be. And then there's a younger man next to him. That younger man is Ahrayah. So explain more about this Abu.
Let me see if I can share what I got myself. Screen share. Here we go. Let's see. Let's see. Can you?
I stopped screen sharing on my end.
All right. Hold on a second. Do you see a picture on yours?
Yeah, I do.
All right. Yeah, that's so. Say what were you gonna say?
I see it.
All right, so that's a clear shot. But as you said, the man on the right from what you showed, that's Abba Bivens. The person on the left is Ahrayah as a boy, and the rumor is that this was at his bar mitzvah. That's the way the ICGJC spins it. This actually came up in their Purge Out the Rebels DVD, if I recall correctly. But I think that's mistaken. I think this was actually because, as you mentioned, Bivens has something in his hand. It looks like it's a palm branch that they use for Sukkot and for more specifically for Hoshana Rabbah. So I think that this was them more specifically, well, obviously in the rabbinic spectrum. You see, he's wearing a prayer shawl. Yahanna talked about Matthews having a sheet over his head. That sheet would be the very prayer shawl that Bivens is wearing in this photo. But that's another thing. Anyway, let me unshare that for a second. Let's see.
And so, Abu, explain to everybody the significance of this type of thing happening at the school or under Abba Bivens' purview. Like, why is that significant to overall One West history?
Well, first off, it's good to know that he came out of the Commandment Keepers. It's also good to know that he came from a very sort of, well, not very, but quasi-rabbinic spectrum. When we did that dividing line in July of 2016, we got into this in greater detail about that. And I just think that's relevant just to show that Ahrayah, I also wanted to show that just because you mentioned Ahrayah has been in this since he was a boy. I don't know if he was born into it or not, but yeah, he's been in it since he was very young. and he was a student of Bivens since he himself was very young. Although we don't know when that picture was taken, it may have been taken in the 50s. That would be my guess, late 50s. But
also, some of this, I think, in my opinion, shows that there's a fluidity among a lot of Hebrew Israelites that shows they're flexible in a lot of matters of practice throughout their history. And that's why we see these new developments frequently. There's a fluidity and their understanding of what they think is right or wrong as far as how to do something or not to do something at any given moment. They change, all of a sudden, all the stuff that they said last year was all wrong, and anyone that believes it was all wrong, but they, until then. But the thing is, that's a constant trademark of this movement. But what's the glue? What's the thing? What's the engine that's pushing it? If you can go from not believing in the Old Testament or not believing in the New Testament to believing into the New Testament to going back and forth between the Old and New Testament to Messiah, yes, Jesus, no. I mean, you see, there's a fluidity it's this conviction that we are the blood descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the law is our salvation. It's how to get us out of this mess. It's how we're made right in the eyes of Yah. Those two things, in my view, are what are the core to something that's really fluid on matters which you should not be fluid about. You should not be fluid on whether Jesus is the Messiah, but yet they are in a lot of ways. I'm not saying all of them. I understand I've heard some one Westerners speak with more conviction about Christ, but overall, I think you can see, at least that's my understanding of why this is helpful too, because it shows you what really matters to them, even their leaders in the current generation, in a lot of ways. But it also shows really, they be hating on the Ashkenazi Jews, but they've ripped off a lot of their rabbinical traditions.
Yeah, they were much closer to them, and still there's things, even Lashon Qadash, that very phrase, even though they pronounce it differently, that's clearly born out of the Ashkenazi Lashon Kodesh, or at least the rabbinic Lashon Kodesh. It's not a biblical phrase, although of course you can treat the concept as biblical, but it's a phrase that comes from rabbinic literature. Even their terminology, which is considered distinctive. By the way, we don't have to jump at it right away, but the next clip is that one Commandment Keeper student says Bivens distorted. I don't know if you got that. It's the one with the woman.
What's the actual title of it? Okay, I got it. Okay, all right. Yeah. Walk us up to this clip. It's a 1 minute and 43. Walk us up to it.
Okay, so this is the first video. Now, again, there's been some very interesting breakthroughs because there's been rumors. There's rumors that have been out there, but it's all sort of, somebody typing something on the internet. Uziel Lewy has an account on YouTube, and we have to give some credit to him, some respect to him. This is a clip from his videos. You can see his account. He interviews various non-One West Israelites who knew Bivens or were from that time. And so here he's interviewing a woman who her father was a prominent member of the Commandment Keepers, and so she mentions there's a brief mention about Bivens distorting the Commandment Keepers, also being a product of the Commandment Keepers, and it's an interesting way to set up the other clips because it helps us keep this kind of stuff in mind. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so when you watch this, she knows more about Abba Bivens in some ways, maybe than a lot of current One Westers, even some of the older ones. Also,
she gives us a Commandment Keeper's perspective of Bivens. She gives us a small taste of that because she sort of shares what she heard from older people in the Commandment Keepers, including her father, and she sort of gives us a small look at the way the Commandment Keepers perceive Bivens. Right. A second ago, we saw Yahanna giving sort of the One West perspective of the Commandment Keepers, which was probably transmitted through Bivens and then through Ahrayah.
Right.
So this is from the other angle.
Yeah, exactly. Good point. All right, I'm going to play this clip, everybody.
What can the leadership of this generation learn from the leadership of the past? Because you're mentioning that you had probably more congregations then than we have now. I mean, we talk about now that we have 20 congregations, but when we talk about our history, so back then we have more people. But what can the leadership learn from the past? Because it seems like even though you had many congregations, like you said, they were sister congregations. Nobody looked at as an opposition.
No, I didn't say everybody. I said I said those two. I said Commandment Keepers and then Abraham, Rabbi Ford and Rabbi Matthews. I did not say, and so it's careful to make that distinction. Some of them were actually trying to compete. They never did the work Rabbi Matthews did. They were envious of him, just like people are, and never did the work he did. And actually, like Rabbi Bivens actually distorted what he taught. Rabbi Bivens was a contemporary with my father.
I just want to ask a question about that. Rabbi Bivens, did he used to come to Commandment Keeper?
Rabbi Matthews was a contemporary with my father, absolutely. They're trying to say that Rabbi Bivens came up with this construct on his own. No, he did not. He learned from Rabbi Matthews, but he took it out.
So now,
Bivens, I own Rabbi Bivens, not what has become of his order. But I will never not own him because I know he was my father's contemporary. Yes, but I didn't see him doing that. But I heard the elders talking about him.
Hey, yo, Abu, oh man, I had this great question. oh no, hold on. Well, maybe it's not a great question now. I just forgot. Okay, go ahead and say something, bro. I'll remember what I was gonna say in a second.
No problem. Well, just the interesting thing in here is just precisely that you get to see a small view of the Commandment Keepers' perspective. Because again, Bivens is someone who came out of the Commandment Keepers, and so when you deal with sort of the One West history and get your sort of oral history from members of the One West stream, you only get one perspective. You get to see the other perspective, and I think it's a very plausible one, which is that from their perspective, he was a member of the Commandment Keepers. Well, that's not just their perspective. He was, and he wound up teaching something different. So they saw that as him distorting it. Interesting little historical note about this. The people who retain the main school and the school that still has Ahrayah has been the Israelite Church of God in Jesus Christ. And when they started having all these splinter groups around 2004, 2005, the ICGJC, the Israelite Church of God in Jesus Christ, started ratcheting up this idea of the rebels. Now, it existed in One West before that. They do this appeal to First John, the second chapter, and that existed in One West before the ICGJC. But nonetheless, they would play on this idea of like the Antichrists and the people who have left the church. This idea of the rebels are people that broke away from us, so therefore they were never of us, and so on down the line. An interesting thing about that, because they played that up, like we're the original school and you came from us, therefore you're false. The ICGJC would play that. Nathaniel, the leader of IUIC, before his group blossomed into what it is now, when it was very small, it might have been just him and Barak Shah and and a few congregants. He used to be on MySpace, and he wrote up the history as he understood it of One West. And he had mentioned that Bivens was with the Commandment Keepers, and then he broke away from the Commandment Keepers to start his own thing. And in that MySpace blog, now this is like more than 10 years ago, he wrote it, or roughly 10 years ago, members of the ICGJC were furious that he actually wrote that and were saying to him, now he didn't use the word rebel, he just said Bivens was a member of the Commandment Keepers, then he broke away and started his own thing. That caused a problem for the ICGJC narrative. So there were literally people commenting on Nathaniel's MySpace blog saying, oh, how dare you accuse Abba Bivens of being a rebel, and blah, blah, blah. They were upset by it because it flew in the face of their narrative. Nathaniel was just sincerely giving the history, but the way they were taking it was because we assume that if you have a school and then people break away from that and start something new, then they're copycats, they're hand-me-downs, they're rebels, they're antichrists, and that you need to stick with the root. The problem with that narrative is that can be turned against Bivens, and they sense that intuitively. And that's why they wound up accusing Nathaniel of calling Bivens a quote-unquote antichrist and a rebel and all that. And it's interesting that that they had that reaction, because there is sort of a problem with that narrative. Oh, you broke away from us, so well, he himself broke away from another school. With that in mind, now you get to see a small view of the Commandment Keeper's perspective, that he was somebody who broke away and distorted Commandment Keeper's teachings to some degree. And then on top of that, you notice she makes an allusion to the fact that his own students distorted his teachings. So she would say, like when she was saying, I own Bivens, what she meant is she claims him as part of the history, but she says him, not what his order became. So she distinguishes between, what became of One West and Bivens himself. Like you can see these people who go way back, they recognize a difference between Bivens and these other people, and this is going to come up again and again in these video clips. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, so hold on. Did I just hold on? Okay, want to make sure I got the right button here. Okay, so what this shows is that Abba Bivens comes out of this heavily influenced by mainstream Judaism, rabbinical Judaism stream called the Commandment Keepers, which was what some people call Black Judaism. Okay, but they still did believe they were descendants of Israelites ethnically, and there was an ambivalence about were other Jews who claimed to be what they were, you know. But the main thing was to make sure that they were saying that they were true Israelites by blood as well as religious practice. Abba Bivens retains, of course, that idea, breaks away. It's not entirely clear why. We've heard different reasons, but he does leave the Commandment Keepers, and we're saying this seems to be about in the 60s. Then he's killed, as Yahanna alluded to, by Muslims, by the way, in Newark, New Jersey. And then when he dies, you hear about this power struggle. 3 of the students leave, and there's a further development of doctrine even then. And that's the One West school, really, that we refer to. But Abba Bivens is kind of like the grandfather of it in a way. Maybe Ahrayah is the father, you know what I'm saying? And then everyone else is the children. There's something like that. But this is important because notice how the story Abu just told shows how history can play into contemporary narratives, the version of history you tell and how you use or misuse it. That's why we've recently realized we can't fully trust the One West version of their own history, and not necessarily because they're lying. We're not actually trying to necessarily point the finger and say we think so-and-so is lying. For example, later on we're going to talk about the Lashon Qadash, who came up with it. If Yahanna says Ahrayah came up with it, I don't think he's necessarily lying when he says that. That may just be the received history he's gotten. That may be what he thinks, but we're saying we maybe don't. Now we're casting doubt on that because of information that's been uncovered, which we're going to show you.
Yeah.
So
I would say a good clip to jump into. It won't be for Lashon Qadash yet, and it's funny. I see guys in the comment section are asking about Lashon Qadash. That is going to come up later in this discussion. But first, we should get to the tribes chart, and it'll be interesting because this will also show the development between Bivens and. So we're going to sort of hit 2 targets with one stone with this one. We're going to touch this next clip. If you could show it, it's the one titled Bivens Had Tribes Chart Hustle.
I got it.
Okay. So what this is going to do is it's going to touch on the fact that the tribes chart, it's generally believed that the tribes chart originates with Ahrayah. There's a lot of One Westerners who say that. And as you were saying,
everyone says that. No one does. We've said that.
Yes, of course, because we've been handing down the narrative that comes from everyone else. And on touching on the thing about we're not accusing anyone of lying, I think the people who hand this down, they hand it down sincerely. And this is a history that they got from a man that they trusted, which is Ahrayah. Ahrayah himself may have skewed the history. So this next clip, it's going to show that the tribes chart does not necessarily originate with Ahrayah. And B, it's also going to touch on the issue of the historical development of One West after the death of Bivens, the historical development from these 3 students, because there is a change acknowledged. Now, again, this is yet another Israelite who is not a One Wester. Now, these are all clips
Just
of
a minute.
old.
Hold on. I'm going to let you introduce who this man is in the clip, but I would want to talk again to the listeners. If you're watching this, you can tell we're getting into some pretty foundational stuff because this is something you will see in the streets of major cities, a chart that has 12 tribes on it. They'll point to it and tell you which one you are or aren't. This is relevant to 2017 in the street corners of metropolitan areas and on the internet. So please share this broadcast. Again, we want people to get this information. We know what goes up later and they can watch it later, but it's great to interact with people live and have them see it as it's happening and developing, and we can interact. So if you're in a group on Facebook, like an apologetics group, share this, please, right now, because we're not going to be on all night, you know what I'm saying? If you have Twitter, right? I mean, even if only one person on your Twitter feed would be interested, just share this. So we want people to get this out. Take that link, and share it right now, because we're getting into some foundational, fundamental, interesting stuff that relates to how people view themselves, view God, view their own history, and has to do with matters of truth and lie, and really ultimately life and death. So with that, Abu, why is it significant? This clip we're about to play, why does it matter what this man says? Who is this man? Why is he being interviewed? And why is it significant what he's about to say? Explain it before I play it, and then I'll play it.
Okay, again, now being that we're sort of leaning on the research of Uziel Lewy, I want to again give him credit. This is another video from the YouTube account of Uziel Lewy. This is yet another, all his clips that we're showing are of Israelites who are not part of the One West Stream. And this is significant. These are Israelites who are old timers who go way back and who knew Abba Bivens, but were not part of the One West Stream. And it's interesting because they have a different perspective. And unlike just unlike every One Wester, with the exception of Ahrayah, they actually met Bivens. And so they give a different perspective on the history. What he's going to talk about is seeing Bivens preach and teach. And this clip is relevant to the tribes chart, which we've all said, we've all understood to have originated with Ahrayah. So let's set it up with that.
So this is not an enemy of the Hebrew Israelite religion. He is someone who would self-identify as a Hebrew Israelite.
Exactly. He's just not a One Wester. That's the significance.
He's not a One Wester. But this is also a man who, remember, knew Abba Bivens personally. Nate, Tahar. They didn't know Abba Bivens personally. They just knew some people who knew him. So with that, let me play this clip. Will be very enlightening. Listen carefully, everybody, to what he's going to say.
You know, and then when Abba Bivens get up with that impressive voice and that stately manner and that white beard,
And he also used to wear a turban.
and he wore a white turban, you know, and he when he starts speaking, you know, our people were and always were in those days intent on bowing to the gray hair. You know, it was like, that's it. You know, they said we're now going to hear from our elder and our teacher, and he's standing up there and he start talking and saying, and I can prove it with that book you got right there in your hand. You know, and anyway, that was a great experience. I went up there a couple times. One time we were over there and they had the charts up, and they had the charts that said if you're Jamaican, you come from this tribe, and if you're from Barbados, it's that tribe, and read the book, said, hey, come on, Pop. I said, what is, you know that ain't right. He said, of course, Danny, I know that's not right. He said, but that's the hook. That's how we get them into place, and we wire them up to what's true. Well, you know, years later, after he passed away and his sons and all of them, they either died or moved away, the Tanakh school began to teach those things as truth. This is the truth, you know, and well, anyway.
All right, so everyone listen to what was just said. So the man in that clip referred to himself as Danny, meaning that was when Abba Bivens was talking to him, and he refers to Abba Bivens as Pop.
One small correction on that. I don't think I think he was present for that conversation, but he himself is not Danny. I think there's I don't know much about this guy, but there's a guy that a number of people refer to as Brother Read the Book, and I'm guessing that's Danny.
Really?
Yeah, so but I don't know the history on that guy.
Like brother, comma, read the book. He's called. There's a man named Brother Read the Book.
I believe so. I think so. Yeah, because that comes up in a number of Uziel Lewy's videos. People say like, "Yeah, I went out there and Brother Read the Book said to me that you know X, Y, and Z," and it's like, I don't know who this person is. That's something.
Brother Read the Book is Danny. You think like Batman is Bruce Wayne? Do you think that's type of thing?
That's my assumption. Yeah, but
Brother,
I could be wrong.
Read the book, bro.
Hey, you never know.
Yeah, okay.
That's just my speculation. I don't know a lot about this. I mean, with my focus on the Israelite spectrum has always been on the One West Stream. I'm very ignorant of the rest of that stuff, with the exception of maybe .bit Moshe or something like that. But yeah.
So there's a conversation, and this man is present for. And when the chart detailing if you're this ethnic group where you could originate from this place, then you're this tribe. When it's presented or showed, the man says, you know that ain't right. And Abba Pop says, yeah, I know that's not right, but that's the hook to get him in. Then we wire him up to the truth. And it's so telling what this man says. He says, well, years later, some of his students, and he talked about a Tanakh school. That's the Israelite school of Torah, which is the original name for the One West school, basically. He's referring to that. And he's
interesting point on that, if I may interject.
True. Say what?
Sorry, if I may interject on that real quick. What I've heard from various One Westers is that Bivens School was called the Israelite School of Torah, or just the School of Torah. It's interesting that a number of people say that it was a number of these people that Uziel Lewy interviewed. They understand it as the Tanakh School or Israel School of Tanakh. It's a small difference, but maybe he had two different names, or maybe the Israelite School of Torah claim has been mistaken, and maybe it was the Tanakh School, because the people who knew him seem to know it as the Tanakh School. There's other people who knew it that way as well.
I noticed that and I could be wrong. I thought I saw a graphic or an image or a photograph somewhere with the wording of Israelite School of Torah. Like some old. Have you ever seen some old image where it's written out like that, like a flyer or something?
No, I've never. Not that dates from that time. No, I've never seen any literature that dates from Bivens' time.
Okay, all right. So but notice, everyone, I'm gonna play the last couple. I'm gonna play the last 30 seconds of this video one more time, because I think it's very, very important to hear what he said, and then I'll let you break it down further what he's saying here. Everyone, listen to the last 30 seconds of this one more time.
Danny, I know that's not right. He said, but that's the hook. That's how we get them into place, and we wire them up to what's true. Well, years later, after he passed away, and his sons and all of them, they either died or moved away, the Tanakh school began to teach those things as truth. This is the truth, and well.
So he's clearly saying it's not true. But notice again, this is not a man with an axe to grind. Relay back to the beginning of the video where he was speaking of Abba Bivens in very glowing terms and referring to his rhetorical abilities with great admiration. But yet here he has this thing he mentions, and then he talks later and he's just kind of like, well, they taught it as true, but So Abu, explain why this is significant. I mean, people got to understand what they're watching right here.
For so many reasons. Well, first off, keep in mind that phrase, quote, that's the hook, end quote. That's some phrase that's going to come up again in a later video. In a later part of this discussion. But it's interesting, first off, because it it flies in the face of the popular narrative about the origin of the tribes chart, which is that Ahrayah created it. He received it as sort of a revelation or a vision or something to that effect. What it seems to be is the people who actually knew Bivens didn't understand it that way. It didn't originate with Ahrayah. Bivens himself may have developed it, or at least a proto chart, a previous version of it. It didn't necessarily look exactly like the tribes chart they have today, but it seems it started. The people who knew him understood it as starting out as a hustle, just as a gimmick to get people in, to get their attention, and that's significant because it gives the impression that Now, Ahrayah may have been with Bivens at this point, most likely, probably. But nonetheless, the point is that it seems that the narrative about the chart originating with Ahrayah may well be false. People who actually knew Bivens seems to have understood it as just being something that developed as I said, as a gimmick or a hustle, and that's relevant. But it's also relevant. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Everyone just stop and process that. This speaks volumes to issues of integrity and actually how you understand truth. Do you view truth as something that is a reflection of their very character and nature of God? Truth is something that is fundamental to who he is. For the scriptures say he cannot lie. That's why one of the 10 commandments is thou shalt not lie, because we are holy when we reflect who he is, and the commandments are an expression ultimately of God's own character. That's why they're good, holy, and pure. Now, this shows their view, at least Abba Bivens and then later Ahrayah, to a certain extent, their view of the truth. And then there's a certain allowance or leeway in which it can be manipulated for an end. Now, maybe he really thought the end of what this would do was a good thing. That this would enable people to come in, then they would be more likely to receive something that was truly truth. But maybe he was a very pragmatic view to be able to manipulate it like that. And you got to say, well, if he's willing to manipulate that, what else? What things did Abba Bivens teach his students that we don't really know what he viewed was true or not. And does that tradition kind of continue on? And there's a little morality tale in there for Christians. When we evangelize, when we witness, even when we debate, when we present apologetic arguments, we must make sure we're not utilizing things we know that aren't exactly right or precise just so someone will get saved. You know what I'm saying? We got to also check out ourselves. Like, you know, if we make a mistake in an argument when we're speaking to an evolutionist, you know, like I'm just kind of making sure we hold up the mirror to ourselves as well, but just kind of a stop to do that. But this is significant that these men who actually knew Abba Bivens said this. This is extremely significant. So Abu, I just want to make that little pause. Go ahead, bro.
No, well, so interestingly now, so we have on the one hand, we have the long-standing claim that the tribes chart comes from Ahrayah. Now we have this narrative that seems to paint a different picture. All right, so maybe it was wrong about the tribes chart, but Lashon Qadash, that came from Ahrayah, didn't it? Right? That's something I've seen a number of long-time One Westers say. That, you know, I remember hearing Tahar say that multiple times, saying, you know, you wouldn't have the Hebrew if it wasn't for Ahrayah, and I've heard other people say that. Well, so that brings us to our next video. If you can, it's the clip that's titled Bivens Created LQ.
I got it,
we're
bro.
going to talk about Lashon Qadash. Now, to set this up, this is yet another video on the account of Uziel Lewy. It's another old-time, non-One West Israelite who knew Abba Bivens personally. Of the various people we've shown, he apparently knew Abba Bivens the best because he studied with him. In fact, here's something interesting. This is sort of off subject. He may have influenced Bivens School and then One West in ways that a lot of people don't understand. Can I segue into the thing about Bnei Zaken and Landis?
Of course.
Okay, so this is off subject before we get to Lashon Qadash. Wait, give me 1 second.
Well, hold up. Let me I'll show the book you're gonna mention then, I guess.
Yeah, I don't have the page number, but it's Landis's Landing. I keep saying Landis. I'm sorry, James E. Landing, Black Judaism, right? Well, whatever the case. There you go. In this book, he doesn't really, you know, talk about One West never comes up in this book, but something in that book. So this is about African American converts to mainstream Rabbinic Judaism, and it's also about Israelite groups to some extent, but it never gets into the One West stream. But interestingly, he talks about I think the guy's name was Cole or Coleman. You might be able to find him in the index. There was a African American convert to specifically the Lubavitcher interpretation of Orthodox Judaism, of Hasidic Judaism, and this guy in the 70s used to write about the Israelite groups that he would come into contact with, and he would sort of write polemics against them. So you have a African-American convert to Orthodox Judaism, specifically the Lubavitcher interpretation of such, and he's interacting with Hebrew Israelites in New York and writing about them. Now, the interesting thing about that is about 10 years ago, I read a little bit about this guy. I think his name is Rabbi Coleman, and he had said that in 1974, he encountered a group which...
By the way, real quick, there's Rabbi Coleman.
That's him. That's him right there. So this is a guy, he was a member of Chabad. I have no idea if he's still alive, but he was a member of Chabad, of the Lubavitcher sect, which is based in Crown Heights and Eastern Parkway. Interesting and real quick about Eastern Parkway, when Nathaniel was first getting Israel United in Christ started, they used to often set up a camp almost right across the street from the Lubavitcher headquarters in Eastern Parkway. They'd be right out there, like around Utica and Eastern Parkway. Anyway, but that's a relevant segue. Segue within a segue. This guy, Rabbi Coleman, he wrote about a group in roughly 1974 that he encountered them, and it was an Israelite group in New York who said that they study Torah, and he said, well, can I see your Torah scroll? And they presented a King James Bible. And he also said that they wore turbans. So they're King James onlyists, they're turban wearing King James onlyists in New York. You know, it sounds like he's describing One Westers. And this always boggled my mind. I was like, is this the earliest reference to One West in print? But Landing himself says that this is a reference to Bnei Zaken.
Here it is.
Go ahead.
Page 296. Page 296. I'm going to read it real quick.
Yes, please do.
Okay, so this is I believe this is actually this is from Coleman's own pen here.
Yes.
And it says this: one group of black Israelites, which was recently accused of shaking down merchants and organizing gangs in Brooklyn. that in and of itself is significant, which says, which has 12 tribes with chiefs and a Nasi or prince as its overall spiritual leader. In an interview a few months ago with one of the chiefs who wore a turban, earrings, and medallions with a lion's head carved on it, I inquired as to whether or not they had classes in Jewish studies and also with which of the three movements they identified themselves. I was told that they had class in Torah nightly and was shown a copy of the King James Version of the Bible with the New Testament as proof. I was also assured that they davened every Sabbath at the camp, the name by which they called their place of worship, and that they don tefillin every Sabbath. Jews do not pray with tefillin on the Sabbath or holidays, it says. So
I'm glad he mentioned the camp as well. So everything, the lion, the turban, the King James Bible, the calling their system a camp. Interesting. Sounds like one Westers, but if I'm not mistaken, either in a footnote or an endnote, Landing clarifies, no, this is B'nai Zaken. And so this sort of left me confused. I've wondered about this. What B'nai Zaken? I don't know anything about them.
Oh yeah, okay. Here it is. It's on page 311. It's footnote 76 in the chapter titled "Congregations in New York since 1930." This congregation was B'nai Zaken, see above, and many sites a wide variety of illegal activities emerged and were supported to provide financial assistance to the Hebrew Israelites in Israel.
So I used to, when I read this, the first time I read this as someone with interested in One West history, I used to think, what is B'nai Zaken? And because it sounds like he's describing One West. Here's the interesting thing. The only reason we went on this long segue, which to set up a clip that's relevant to Lashon Qadash, is the guy who's speaking in another part of the video that we're not going to show here. He sort of bridged the gap for me. This guy is a student of B'nai Zaken who went to study with Abba Bivens and showed his members, he taught them how to tie the turban. So B'nai Zaken had turbans, One West had turbans. I could never figure this out. It turns out that B'nai Zaken predates One West, and that the reason One West had turbans is because they inherited it from Abba Bivens. And where did Abba Bivens get it? His school got it from this guy, Nasik Barak, who brought it from B'nai Zaken. That's because of Uziel Lewi's interview, I suddenly was able to bridge that gap, 10 years after wondering about it. But that's just the segue to talk about this guy. He's an interesting guy. He's a guy from B'nai Zaken who had some influence on Abba Bivens' school, knew Abba Bivens. Now, I'm not saying he had complete influence over him, but he's relevant because of all the people we're showing, he knew him the best. He studied with him. And here he's going to say something relevant to Lashon Qadash, although he doesn't call it Lashon Qadash. He calls it Derek Avot, which literally means way of the fathers. So here we go.
And by the way, when he speaks Hebrew, he's speaking normal Hebrew.
Yeah, he actually says that he didn't accept it. He speaks, as he calls it, Sfaradi, which literally means Sephardic. So he sees himself as speaking the Sephardic version of Hebrew, which is interesting because, on a side note, a lot of the old school One Wester group, let me take that back. I'm sorry, that's an error. A lot of the old school Israelite groups that are not One West were fascinated by the Sephardim. So the Commandment Keepers seem to have an interest in them. I know Adat Beit Moshe, which was in Philly and then in southern Jersey and all that, they seem to have an interest in the Sephardim. The old school Israelite groups from way back that weren't with One West, they had a sort of interest in the Sephardim. So he mentions that, his Hebrew is Sfaradi or Sfaradit.
They tended to view Sephardic style Jews with less suspicious eyes than they did Ashkenazi Jews.
Even the way they dressed. When you see Abba Bivens wearing that hat on top of his head in that picture we showed, and also Matthews, that's the Sephardic style mitznefet. It's a distinctly Sephardic hat, if I'm not mistaken. It's the mitznefet that the Sephardim wear. Also, some Ashkenazis wore it, but they got it because, they were interested in the Sephardim.
All right. Go ahead. Here's the clip, ladies and gentlemen.
And this is relevant to Lashon Qadash, the version of Hebrew that's distinct to One West.
Yeah, so when you hear Hebrew Israelite One Westers say Shalom or Salakia or Yahawashai, all that stuff going on is Lashon Qadash, which is, speculative vocalizations about Paleo Hebrew, how to pronounce vowels, which ends up basically just being a bunch of A's for the most part. Now, listen to what this man says about Lashon Qadash, because everyone has always said Ahrayah is the one who received a revelation about it. But listen to what this man says, and then we'll comment on it later. Here's the clip.
Used to teach us the way of our fathers, I learned that, but I really thought that.
Moshe, Abraham, yeah, he used to teach them.
Yeah, the way, the Hebrew, but it's the way of our father, you know, like that. The way of our father.
How he speak like that.
Yeah, everybody goes, you know, instead of saying shalom, they say shalom, they say barakata, you know. And, you know, it was, you know, Abba told me that he was reading the Tanakh one time, you know, and some man appeared in his kitchen in a green suit. I said, yeah, you sure? He said, yeah, and this man taught him how to read it. And that's why he called it Derek Abot. But I really didn't like it, you know, but I learned it too, but we don't use it, you know, because we use Tafadik, you know, that's the kind of Hebrew we speak. Tafadik.
Oh, hold on. I know you're going to comment. But don't take all my fun. Let me just say a little something. Guys, okay, this is so significant. Ahrayah, he was the main teacher of the One West school, and he's the one who brought this LQ to everybody, okay? This Lashon Qadash. That many of the camps still speak even out on the street, right? He claims he received it by a special revelation, just like how he claims he got the 12 tribes chart. Yet, you hear this older man who is a Hebrew Israelite, who knew Abba Bivens personally, say, Abba Bivens says a man in a gray suit appeared in his kitchen. And did you hear what the man said? I asked Abba Bivens, are you sure? And he said, yeah. I thought that was kind of funny. And he says, he showed him how to read it. And notice the man probably 3 different times in the video went, you know, how he was imitating Lashon Qadash because he's pronouncing everything with an A sound. You know, and that's what Lashon Qadash is. That's why the names are like Tazariak and Tazadakia, and that's why it's Lashon Qadash, you know, et cetera, because of that. So this is extremely significant, and I'm going to let Abu comment, but everyone just stop and think. This is the second thing that's a significant distinctive with One West Hebrew Israelism that Ahrayah claims he got through revelation, divinely revealed to him in essence, that actually it looks like it started with Abba Bivens. At the very least, we can say there's contradictory accounts. Now, which account will we believe? Ahrayah, a man, for example, who said Yahweh was going to return in 1999, 2000, and it didn't happen? Or these older men who don't have an axe to grind, they're not prejudiced witnesses, you know what I'm saying? They believe they're Hebrew Israelites, and they knew Abba Bivens personally. They're friends with him. They had conversations with him. So this is extremely significant. Hey, everyone, we got a guest who says, hello, coons and white supremacists. By the way, oh, moderators, don't get carried away. I appreciate it. Biblios, I see you're being zealous. I appreciate that. But we kind of let them say a lot. We'll let them get away with a lot. It's only if it gets real abusive, because we think it's helpful to let them air their grievances. And also we think it's helpful for them to be able to, as long as they don't start really threatening and all that. So just don't be as zealous. If he swears and stuff, that's actually okay. Only if it gets real carried away. We try to have a real liberal policy. We're not like them, basically. So, but I appreciate it because we do want to protect it. Now, if we had 150 viewers and it was getting crazy, we would bear down more. But anyways, so Abu, back on topic. Break it down, my man.
Well, I mean, you covered it right there. The gist of it is there's 2 different narratives now. I mean, there's one narrative that it comes from Ahrayah. Some have said through revelation. Now, keep in mind, I haven't heard this from Ahrayah himself, but I've heard it from so many of the old timers that you have to assume that he's their source. And yet, none of these people that hand down that tradition, as we've said before with these other traditions, none of them ever met Bivens. And yet, people who actually met Bivens say that he was claiming to receive it as a revelation. Real quick comment, just something to keep in mind, because I think some people might zero in on the fact that he said shalama instead of shalom, or some now say shalawam. What that's about, something to keep in mind, I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the tribes chart, is Bivens may have started the tribes chart, but it may have developed from there. So too, this precursor to Lashon Qadash, Derek Abot, may have itself developed. They may have been saying shalama and then changed it to shalom. Interesting thing, there is a question in the teaching of Lashon Qadash is if you say that every letter only has one pronunciation, right? How is it that sometimes a word will end with a vocalization, and sometimes it won't? Like, for example, One West says Yashar Allah for Israel. So the L, the very last character, the Lamed, is also vocalized ah. Yet Shalom is not, they say Shalom instead of Shalama. So it begs the question, you suddenly have two vocalizations. One is silent, the other is the A. And I bring this up because it was such an issue that Ahrayah, you know, the proponents of Lashon Qadash, they attack the Masoretic text for introducing the nikudot, the little dots and dashes that you see in Hebrew Bibles. They attack that. But the interesting thing is Ahrayah, or apparently Ahrayah, the One West, also taught their own system of nikudot, of diacritical marks that sort of help you with the pronunciation. They only had 2 marks, but they would have like a sort of, they look like parentheses turned on their side, one pointing up, the other pointing down, and that would signify whether the letter was silent or had an A vocalization. So they ended up creating their own diacritical marks, so their own lashon, their own nikudot, in a sense. And I could look for an image and show that later on. But anyway, so we may have been referring to a precursor to Lashon Kodash in this Derek Abot, but it's interesting. Also, this also takes us back to the fact that the phrase, this has come up, Vocab, for those of you who are familiar with Vocab's account, he has a video titled Lashon Kodash, Israelite Hebrew Takedown, or Lashon Kodash Takedown.
Lashon Kodash Takedown, yeah.
So that's, we covered the subject there, and what I'm about to mention, and we also in Alpha and Omega Ministries, they back in July of 2016, Vocab and I were guests on a Dividing Line episode in which we discussed this as well, where something we mentioned earlier in passing, the very phrase Lashon Kodash, which in Yiddish is Lashon Kodesh, is something taken directly from Rabbinic Judaism. That's not a phrase, the exact phrase you'll find nowhere in the Bible. It's something that comes from Rabbinic Judaism. And we speculated, well, I guess that makes sense because Ahrayah had a Rabbinic past. Interestingly, being that Lashon Kodash seems to have originated with Abba Bivens, and we know Bivens also had a very Rabbinic, or at least quasi-Rabbinic veneer to him because he came out of the Commandment Keepers. He himself may have taken that from the Ashkenazi Jews he associated with, you know, and so on down the line, or the Rabbinic Jews that influenced him, you know, the very phrase.
Right, and also in the version Abu that I have heard, right, where Ahrayah supposedly gets the revelation from an angelic visitor of Lashon Kodash, the version I heard, and this actually is interesting because I heard this from Tanakh only Hebrew Israelites. So I didn't hear this again from enemies or something like that, but I heard it from Tanakh only Hebrew Israelites who are not One Westers. They're the first ones who told me, yeah, Ahrayah claims that an angel, and a lot of times the version I hear is like, you know, a black angel with a perfect afro, or you hear something like that. But I think the key is like a black angel visited him. And as far as the Lashon Kodash, I thought that I heard it, that it was in his house. There's another version where I think the 12 tribes chart might have been revealed to him in a bar. It's a little confusing which is which. But in one of the versions I heard by a Tanakh only Hebrews, like they say, this angel, this black man, depending on what you understand the visitor to be, began speaking. And Ahrayah is kind of like asks him, what is that you're saying? And he says, this is the language of our fathers. That's what I heard him say. That is significant, that at least in a version I heard, and we're trying to nail this down. That's why we like the video clips from eyewitnesses. That's why we like that instead of just, you know, third or fourth generation, you know, oral only. But this is different. This is more significant because of the significance of the people testifying. And you got 3 different streams that we're showing you tonight, right? And they really go together. They collude, not purposefully, ironically enough. And so then that's important that this language is described as, oh, the language of our fathers, even though it ends up being Lashon Kodash, because the man in the video clip, the way he titled it, what he said Abba Bivens called it was the language of our fathers, right? What was the phraseology, Abu?
Way of Derek Abot literally means way of our fathers. Literally way of fathers. So, but you put in it would be Abotenu for our fathers, but that's the gist of it. Our way of our fathers, literally way of fathers. Derek Abot.
So the idea is the way that our forefathers spoke their language, you know, and since they have been lost, they don't want to learn it from Ashkenazis or something. The idea is the angels like revealing Abba Bivens, you know, the way that it was I'm sorry, Ahrayah in this account that we usually hear, revealing to Ahrayah what it is. But here you hear, it seems like Abba Bivens also invented what in essence is Lashon Qadash. Am I missing anything here, Abu?
No, that's the significant part. Actually, can I show a quick image and do a quick screen share?
Yes, sir.
All right, hold on 1 second. Let's see if I can get this.
Are you gonna show?
I'm gonna try and show an image. Yeah, let's see. Your screen share. Sorry about that. Can you see a white paper with a bunch of writing on it?
Yep.
Okay, so this sheet is from this comes from the 90s. This was the kind of worksheet that they used to hand out at the old Israeli Church of Universal Practical Knowledge in One West. I just wanted to show this just so you get a sense of how they taught it. One thing you'll see in the middle column, you'll see the Phoenician characters, or what they like to call the Paleo Hebrew, that they took directly out of Ben Yehuda's dictionary. On the far right, you see some characters. They tried to create their own cursive. There's a Hebrew cursive that exists for the Ashuri script, the standard Hebrew script that you see everywhere, and the Israelis use the cursive. Ahrayah created, or maybe someone before him, but he created another script. It's completely new script. I don't know if anyone's seen that video with the gentleman from the Forward, Kastenbaum. He interviews Nathaniel, and he mentions this other script, you know, that they created, and it's just something they created, and you see it on the right.
Wait, I never really understood that. So on the right column of what you're showing, that's their own invented cursive?
Yeah. So there's a cursive form for standard Hebrew, for the Hebrew that's used now, that's become standard, but there is no cursive form for the Phoenician. You know, so they created a cursive form for the so-called Paleo Hebrew, for the Phoenician script. And that's what that is on the right. But the main reason I wanted to show this, I'm going to try to zoom in here. Tell me, is it zooming in?
Yeah.
Okay,
excellent. Good. Ooh, excellent. Looks good, bro.
All right. So now you see, if you look like, can you see the word mouth, head, tooth, stuff like that? Mark, cross. Do you see those on the right? The English words? It's from the top. It says support, a support.
Okay, okay, I see it.
Eye, mouth, head, tooth, etc. And so the next to those English words are the names of the characters. So you got Samak for Samech, Ayan for Ayin, Pa for Pe, Rash for Resh, Ra'ash they put. But you'll notice there's something that looks like little smiley faces, little parentheses turned on their side. Do you see those little marks underneath them?
Oh, yeah.
And at the bottom, you'll see it says to connect letters, and then it says to separate letters. These are the diacritic marks that they themselves created. So they attack the Masoretic text for having introduced these little character markings, yet they themselves introduced their own little system of diacritics. Yeah, and that's what that is. They created that to try to make sense of, like, when do you vocalize a letter with A, and when do you leave it silent? Like, why do you say shalom instead of shalama, which is what he said. He said originally, the guy that was talking, who knew Abba Bivens, said that back in the day in Derek Abot, they were saying shalama. And then, as we know, One West came to adopt shalom. And then eventually nowadays, some of these cats are saying shalawam, which is especially funny. But anyway, the question is, why do you say Yasha Allah, right? Why do you vocalize the last letter, the Lamed?
That's important. So can you tell everyone where that phrase is actually used a lot? There's calm, Yasha Allah.
Yeah, rise Israel. So they say Kwam Yasha Allah. You'll hear that a lot because they refer to the Israel as Yasha Allah.
But can you tell people, do you know, I don't know if you know this, do you know frequently in the street where you hear that phrase used by One Westers?
No, you tell me. I'm not sure what you're
usually say it after someone a bootlicking exercise.
Oh. Oh man, God help us. That's a disturbing subject unto itself. Oh boy.
Of where, a so-called Edomite will lick their boot, then immediately in unison they start yelling, Kwam Yasharallah. What they're saying is rise up Israel, because they view it as like a little snapshot of what's about to happen. So it's proof of their fulfilling prophecy, basically, the Edomite and the Israelite together. So they love to say it there. So I just had to mention, because people may wonder, what are they saying there? Why are they say that after someone licks their boot? Well, that's why. But go ahead, brother.
So an interesting thing you might see on the internet, anyone who actually studied at One West will say Yasher Allah for Israel, right? And so most of the splinter groups say that. A thing that you'll see online, because now you have all these people, now Tahar sort of, he really pioneered this, even though there were other people doing it. He really did the thing with, really pioneered spreading One West doctrine over the internet. What's happened is that it's no longer centralized. None of the splinter groups control it. So now things get distorted and evolve even faster. One thing you'll see, people who are not part of organized groups, people who are just kind of the DIY types, the do-it-yourself types who just imbibed it over the internet.
The one-man camps?
Yeah, those kind of guys. You start seeing them say Yasher Al instead of Yasher Allah. They don't put the A at the end. Now, that's a new thing. That's something they developed, but it does create an interesting question, which is, why do you say Yasher Allah, vocalizing the last letter, but you don't say Shalama? You know, you don't vocalize the last letter when you say Shalom. And this is like, for example, they love to, when they get into the root in Jeremiah 14:2, they say it's Qadar, not Qadara. You know, they might say Qadar Wa if they get into the Wa at the end, but the root, they call it Qadar instead of, or Qadar instead of Qadar Ra, you know? Whatever the case, the question is, when do you vocalize that last letter and when don't you? This apparently was a question at One West, and to reconcile that, they had to create this system of, because they were inconsistent in that regard, they had to create their own little diacritic marks, you know, their own little diacritical marks, their own versions of the Nikudot. You know, instead of dots and dashes, they got these little smiley and frowny faces.
Bro,
you know?
I mean, this is a big deal. I had no idea until tonight that they created their own diacritical marks. I did not.
And it's funny because
I didn't know they created their own cursive.
Yeah,
now,
but that never caught on.
It never caught on?
The cursive never caught on, but there's a funny thing in one of Yahanna's videos. They don't show it. You only hear him saying it, but he says right there on that wall, we got something over there that looks like Arabic. That's the ancient, we have a cursive form, a script form, or something like that. So while it didn't really catch on amongst the groups today, at least ISUPK might still have a little bit of on the wall of one of their schools.
Hypothetically, Abu, could you write a paragraph using that if you understood the...
Yeah, absolutely. You could write it out. And matter of fact, at the bottom of the page, you can see, here's the funny thing. Before they were calling it Lashon, look at the bottom one. The name of the, I don't even know what this says. The name of the something is, oh yeah, I don't know, the name of the writing. Do you see that? The name of the writing is Ahrayah Mashah, to sort of give themselves credit. Do you see that at the very bottom of the screen? I'll try.
The name of the writing. Yeah, okay.
Is, and then they actually, on the right of that line, you see them writing Ahrayah Mashah. They actually attempt to write in cursive Ahrayah's name and then Mashah's name.
Oh, so wait a minute. Are they saying that are they naming the cursive Ahrayah Mashah?
Yeah, which is sort of admitting that either it's an admission that they created it, or they're at least trying to take credit for its creation. That's funny that they called the script Ahrayah Mashah. But but it's also relevant because you get to see them actually try to write something in their made-up cursive.
So wait a minute. That's like a decoder ring.
Yeah.
Because you could take that and know how to like use it, right? At that point.
Yeah.
We just cracked the code. Bro, we could I in my next book, I want to write a paragraph in that cursive and be like, can anyone tell me what this is? Man,
the second edition of your book or your next book is gonna, in God willing, inshallah, you know, is gonna have a lot of information on this. A lot of the stuff that's coming up here is gonna get into this. I hope, you know, and a lot of, because Lashon Qadash, there's a lot to be said. I'm hoping to do some videos with Faithful to God on this. We're going to try and get into some in-depth stuff on that as well. But whatever the case, continue as you were saying.
So the name of the language is Lashon Qadash, but the name of the cursive script for the language is Ahrayah Mashah.
Yeah, and that sounds mighty familiar. That just happens to be the name of two of the leaders of the school at the time.
Man, bro, this is amazing. What else does it say there at the bottom? Now I want to know everything on this. What's at the very bottom under that?
Oh, they were trying to teach a tiny bit of grammar. It says like past tense, future tense. Unfortunately, I don't have these other pages, but it says like if you want to learn how to do past tense and present tense, you go to page 2. If you want to learn how to do future tense and possessive, you go to adjectives, you go to page 5. The numbers are discussed on page 5 and 8, etc. No.
So this packet was at least 8 pages.
Yeah.
So this is like a Lashon Qadash grammar primer.
Yes, and there was a guy who he didn't release exactly this, but he took it and redid it in a new version, and I have his version. It's a guy named Robert Dennis. He was known as Yahanna, and I have that. I won't be showing it here, but I can share that with you. I think I have emailed it to you before. So you get to see some of their grammar, and it's standard modern Israeli Hebrew grammar. Their concept of Hebrew grammar is very simplistic, very shallow, which is something you experience with a lot of these guys. But yeah.
And
unless we get a sense of the sort of basic grammar they were teaching. You can also see it now because ISUPK purports to teach Lashon Qadash classes. And
what?
Yeah, just do a Google search or a YouTube search for ISUPK Lashon Qadash, and all their videos, it's the same stuff that the One West has always taught. A guy from the ICGJC used to give me his notes back in 2005, a guy in the Philly school. So I got to see that. Then I've gotten to see this. I saw what Robert Yahanna Dennis had. It's all the same stuff. It's just a bunch of vocabulary and then a very threadbare, simplistic, basic grammar. Here's present tense. Here's future tense. Here's, it's just straight modern Israeli Hebrew, but then it's even a very basic version of it. It's not even anything representative of biblical Hebrew insofar that they don't seem to have any sense of the different binyan, the different verbal forms, verbal stems, something that came up when we did our video on Lashon Qadash Takedown, and then also our thing on the name of God that we did with your friend Nissan.
All right, so
but we're going way off course here. But anyway, you get to see there's a lot of interesting stuff in this little sheet here from the 90s that they were handing out.
So the older man in the video that we just played, where he talked about Abba Bivens is the actual inventor of Lashon Qadash. That man next to him in another video, he says, hey, this is my Hebrew teacher. And it seems like they have a semblance, a lot of the Tanakh only Israelites, they have a semblance of like real Hebrew that they learn and care about, okay? And then that's significant because then when you get to One Westers, to our knowledge, we don't know of any One Westers who actually know Hebrew. And a great example, Abu, tell everyone why this is such a great example, is what happened with Rakah with James White and the word bara.
Yes, that's interesting because here's the thing. That was a fascinating thing. A lot of people who don't understand Hebrew, at least people who understand almost any language other than English, should pick up on this. One of the most fascinating things in that first exchange between Rakah Shayar, who was the elder, the leader of Gathering of Christ Church. And keep in mind, this is a guy who's been part of the One West Stream for a long time. He was a member of the Israelite Church of God in Jesus Christ, and he was with them before they had that name. He goes back to the old ICUPK. He goes back to One West, Rakah Shayar. So he's been with them for a very long time at that point, decades, literally. He could have easily been in there 15, maybe 20 years. And they're talking about Genesis 1:1, right? And the second word of the Torah, the second word of Genesis 1:1 is bara. And James White asks him, because he was saying that the verse refers to multiple gods, right? And so James White wanted to make a grammatical point. He asks him, do you see the verb bara there? And he says, yes. And he goes, is that singular or plural? And Rakah makes a face like it was a stupid question and says, that's a verb, almost sarcastically. And so James White sort of asked him, is it singular or plural? And he says, a verb is just a verb. That shows that he was only thinking in English. He doesn't understand any other language other than English, because in English, he's right. A verb is just a verb. You don't have plural verbs and singular verbs in English, but in almost any other language, especially Semitic languages, Arabic, Aramaic, Hebrew, and even lots of European languages, you have verbs that are plural and you have verbs that are singular. But he didn't know that. So this is a guy who's been with it for a long time, and he didn't understand even that basic concept. It was extremely significant because it shows how shallow the teaching of Lashon Qadash is vis-a-vis actual Hebrew. Ultimately, the only difference between Lashon Qadash and And, biblical Hebrew or even modern Israeli Hebrew is really just a difference of pronunciation. That's the only thing they're disputing. They don't have any grammatical points that they want to dispute. But the thing is, they teach almost no grammar. And when you see all their classes, whether it's the new ISUPK classes, they used to be lexicon of GMS, where Ahrayah Lab would teach a little bit of it. I've seen these various packets. It's all the same thing. We teach you a little bit of vocabulary and then just an absolute basic grammar with very little understanding, And it showed that that's all they've ever taught, because Rakesh Yar barely understood it.
All right. So, again, the reason why it's significant is because it seems Abba Bivens is the one who actually came up with Lashon Qadash, not Ahrayah. But Ahrayah told his students he came up with it. And furthermore, he told everybody that he came up with it via revelation, meaning he didn't actually claim to come up with it like through studying, it doesn't seem, but through actually being revealed to him by God. Same thing with the 12 tribes chart. And so this is significant because it shows Ahrayah did not have these special divine revelations. Not that we really ever thought he did, but nonetheless, it kind of proves it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Proves it.
With regards to the next video, now I don't think you need to show the whole video, because it's actually the clip is really long. It's like 6 minutes. So feel free to cut off at any point, because it kind of drags on. But another clip, at least to show a little bit of, is the one titled the 6-minute clip on non-one Western disputing LQ. Do you have that?
Yep.
Okay, so again, this is from a video by Uziel Lewy. He interviews yet another non-one West Israelite, long-time Israelite who met Abba Bivens. And there's sort of an allusion, at least Uziel Lewy himself, it alludes to how people have, like Nasi Barak, have talked about how Bivens himself came up with this thing. And at least you get to hear this guy sort of half acknowledging that, yes, it goes back to Bivens, and then also disputing it and talking about the differences. You don't have to play the whole 6 minutes, but maybe show a little bit of it just so we have it. And then maybe we'll show another clip of him as we start to get into other subjects like the New Testament, which is also an interesting subject.
All right, what I'll do is I could play it and then I can pause it so we could comment on it. But here it is.
Because Nasi Barak, when I was speaking with Nasi Barak, and he was telling me when he was up here, because Nasi Barak was up here for a few years with Abba Bivens, he was saying about the Hebrew that they speak now. Everything is Shalom, and so he told me that Abba Bivens told him that he was sitting at his table one day studying, at his kitchen table studying, and that a man appeared to him in a gray suit, I believe he said, and told him that no, the way that he was doing Hebrew is wrong, that this is the way that he should do Hebrew, and everything is just shalom, the way that these brothers speak it. Your Hebrew teacher is, and not talking down, but your knowledge of Hebrew, is that correct? Or, the way that we speak the Hebrew, is that the correct way? Because, people, you said that men had visions with certain things, and they put certain things on you because of those, and those things came through. What would you say about what you've known in your Hebrew studies and in comparison to what our brothers do in terms of the way that they speak the Hebrew?
I've had many discussions. Even very recently, I did an interview. It's on YouTube now, right, under my name, Cohen Mikhail Levy, and it was basically questions concerning just what you've asked me. This is the manner I would respond. In the Hebrew language, when you read the ancient Hebrew, there are no niquidot, or the vowels, as we would call them. So that there's still, even with the consonants, there's still a pattern of unwritten niquidotes, because you have to have a distinction between the persons or the subjects in the language, right, whether it's past, present, or future tense. Then as you go to the nif'al and the pl and the pu'al and the hif'il and the huf'al and the hif'al, those sounds of those particular benyamin also are distinguished in
the past, present, and future tense of those. Without a shade or different shades of vowels, you would not be able to know whether or not you're in a particular binyan or you've been in the past, present, or future tense. So again, it just doesn't hold true. When you learn the Hebrew language and you begin to speak and you begin to use the language and realize that there are ways within the language, even without the Niquidot, that makes these distinctions, the sound patterns. Also, there's a natural, what we call vowel that human beings have, in particular Hebrews. The Europeans taught us A-E-I-O-U, and they say those were the vowels when you go to study. But in our natural tongue, A-E-I-O-U, that's something you just can't get around. A baby makes those sounds when they come in. It's not going to be all the time. So therefore, it's just understanding. So when you go into Aramaic, which is where Ivri comes from, you have Shemayamai, and you understand, and you have different words that have, again, ends with a ta, but it's not going to be again. Right. So again, you got to go back to linguistics. Right. And so it just doesn't hold true and being able to do that. And if they were to have conversations with one another, because just to say a word or speak, then you have to look and see, well, where are the communities where dialogue has grown, you understand? And what have you. And then time will show whether or not they're able to establish dialogue. If I say to them, okay, say that someone is behind you about to attack you, you understand? You have to be able to communicate and to communicate effectively. Just studying a language is not being able to communicate in it. You have to be able to distinguish whether you're speaking in the present tense, the past tense, the future tense. In Hebrew, you have a word like the word, let's say, rats. You understand? But now you're running. But if someone is chasing you, you're also running, but you got to be able to distinction. So that's when you got to have sound patterns to be able to distinguish those particular tenses and what have you, and whether you are in a active verb form or passive. So they need to question and investigate in their studies whether or not all of that holds true. And that's how I would say it, that again, as we have dialogue, I've had dialogue with those that do. I share my point of view. I always listen for theirs, and I investigate. It just doesn't hold true as I go in and have gone in my studies and communicating with Israelites. For instance, you can go to Ethiopia, they speak Geese. You understand? And when you speak in their languages, they have sometimes the same phonetic pronunciations of words that we have in the Hebrew language.
Okay. All right. So let me tell you guys a little bit about this man. See, this is somebody who like clearly has a knowledge base that is significantly deeper and more nuanced than the average one Wester. And I may not agree. Well, you know, I mean, he's Tanakh only, for example. I may not agree with a lot of directions he goes, but he's somebody that I could listen to and have a trust that they're trying to be sincere, and a trust that there's something to really be learned from him. In fact, I have his book. So this is a book written by the man you're hearing speaking. He's an author. And this is a well put together book. You know, it's a Hebrew Israelite book, you know, and it tries to make some of the same arguments. I don't ultimately agree with what he's saying, but it's laid out very nicely. Clearly comes from someone with a well-ordered mind, you know, his logic. I'm not saying I agree with it, but it's like you can see the argument he is trying to make, and especially compared to other Hebrew Israelite books. So, you know, he's someone that I have some respect for. And you can hear, if you understand what he's saying, it's actually it's like a worse takedown of Lashon Qadash than we've even done. Like he's just totally destroying it in 2 minutes. Abu, break down what this man just did right here.
Well, I mean, it's not entirely relevant to our discussion, but it's nonetheless helpful because you see that sort of tacit acknowledgement about the Lashon Qadash and possibly originating with Bivens. But what he did say was very helpful. Earlier, we mentioned the different verb stems, as he called it, the binyamin. He, like you said, has a much more nuanced understanding of Hebrew that's never been demonstrated by any proponent of Lashon Qadash. I mean, I've had arguments with proponents of Lashon Qadash about, for example, Deuteronomy 28:68, about, the verb hitmakartem. What verb stem is that in? And they just, it's like there's just a complete blank, a complete disconnect. Like you ask them, well, why does, like they'll say it begins hathamakartham or something like that. And there's a question of, what's that? What you showing?
I'm trying to show.
Yeah. Let's see if you can hold that still for a second. Let's see. It doesn't matter.
We'll try to get it.
It's not that big a deal. But let's see.
Okay.
Let's see. Pull it down a little bit. All right, stop right there. Okay. I still can't see it. It doesn't matter. But the gist of it is.
Either way, if I talk while I'm holding it, you can see it. But if you talk, you can't see it. But I was just showing people what you're referring to there. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I still can't see any of that. But anyway, the point is there's the verb that talks about, you will be sold, or in other translations, you will attempt to sell yourselves. There's a question. They'll say the verb in the Hebrew is hitmakartem, right? And so, or they would pronounce it hathamakartam, right? And it begs the question, they'll look it up in Strong's and they'll see the root, makar. And if you ask these guys, these proponents of Lashon Qadash, what is that ha-tha at the beginning of it? Why is it hitmakartem? Why is it ha-tha makaratham, or however they want to pronounce it? And they draw a complete blank, not understanding that prefix represents a very specific binyan, a very specific verb stem. It's the hitpa'el verb stem. And this has relevance to how it can be interpreted, because verbs, this is a long segue, but the gist of it is that from having these discussions with proponents of Lashon Qadash, none of them seem to have a concept of the verb stems, and it's very helpful that gentleman mentioned them. It also came up earlier in our own discussion that this is a significant part of the Hebrew language that none of them are aware of, because they're even though they pretend to be the only ones who know real Hebrew, their understanding of biblical Hebrew grammar is so shallow, and in part this is because most of them only know English, and so they can't conceptualize something that's very alien to English. Like in English, we don't have a concept of different verb stems, where with prefixes and suffixes to change the nature of a verb from passive to active to reflexive and so on. And so this is very alien to them, so they just never imagine it and they never teach it. And so I appreciated him getting into that. Go ahead.
Hold up. Are you saying there's a counter argument to be made from something in Deuteronomy 28:68?
Yes.
The grammar? I don't know about it.
Yes, and it's a very old argument, and not necessarily an argument against them. The point predates them. Even Rashi brings this up. Like if you look up the verse in, for example, the NIV, maybe the ESV, but certainly the NIV, it'll say, "And you will sell yourselves," or "You will attempt to sell yourselves." Matter of fact, what did your translation say that you just showed?
So, this is the JPS, right?
Right.
Here it says, "The Lord will send you back to Egypt in galleys by a route which I told you should not see again. Therefore, you shall offer yourselves for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, but none will buy."
You shall offer yourselves. The King James says you shall be sold. And so the thing is, proponents of Lashon Qadash will say, well, yeah, that's just Esau and them changing the translation. They came up with these translations to try to hide the truth. That's not the actual case. The reality is the verb is reflexive. Excuse me, let me phrase that. The verb is in the hitpa'el, and the hitpa'el sometimes is understood as passive, but is usually often reflexive. When a verb is thrown into the hitpa'el, it can be interpreted as meaning you will do this action to yourself. So active means you do the action, passive means you have the action done to you, and reflexive means you do the action to yourself. So if a hyperliteral reading of the verb, which can be understood from that prefix, that gives away what verb stem it is that the verb is reflexive. It means you will sell yourselves. I think the NIV reflects that. And so while they'll say this is just some sort of conspiracy put forth by Esau, it actually is a point reflected in the grammar itself. And it's a very old point. Rashi brings it up in his commentary on the verse. But anyway, that's a small point. But the point I only brought, go ahead.
Reads identical to the JPS on that point.
Yeah.
Well,
so,
let me ask you, what do you think the right translation is there?
to be fair, I think either translation is possible, but I think the more literal one is you will sell yourselves. You don't always have to treat a verb in the hit pa'el stem as reflexive. You know, it can also be treated as passive, and that comes up a lot. So it can be translated, you will be sold. But most literally, a verb in the hit pa'el stem or binyan is reflexive. It usually means you will do it to yourself, whatever the action is.
KJV reads, "There you shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen."
Yeah, offering yourself puts a different spin on it, and that also becomes interesting because for people who are interested in trying to line this up with third Maccabees, is also interesting. But that's a discussion for another topic. The more literal reading, you will sell yourselves or offer yourselves for sale, is. Oh, actually, I'll tell a funny story about this. There used to be a member of the ICGJC who used to call himself Hathamakar Hakam, right? Or Kakam or something like that, right? And I remember seeing somebody ask him on one of these, like the ICGJC forum or maybe whatever it was, My Truth page or whatever their various platforms are. Somebody had asked him, "Oh, brother, what's your name mean?" And he said, "Oh, my name means addicted to wisdom. Hathamakar Hakam." Now, Hakam is the way they say wisdom, but the interesting part is Hathamakar. That's hitmaker. That's the same verb that appears in Deuteronomy 28, 68.
Oh, really?
And here's the funny thing. He said it means addicted to wisdom because they looked up addiction or addict in Ben Yehuda's dictionary, which gives a modern interpretation. Here's something interesting. Because the verb hitmaker, which is the same verb in that verse, literally means to sell yourself, modern Israeli Hebrew adopted it as a reference to addiction because you sell yourself to what you're addicted to, colloquially speaking. And so this cat said that Hathamakar is ancient Hebrew for addicted because he looked it up in a modern dictionary. And whenever these cats, say, well, we're gonna look it up in the dictionary, they're looking in, modern dictionaries. They're looking at, there's no Lashon Qadash dictionary out there. They just go to mainstream dictionaries and change the pronunciation. And sometimes
his name, which is supposed to be a Lashon Qadash name, militates against what he would want his interpretation for 2868 to be.
Exactly. And not only that, it was obviously reaching for, it was also an example of them grabbing a modern concept and putting a Lashon Kodash spin on it. Others, I believe Faithful to God has brought this up many times. I've brought it up in years past. When One West used to teach the numbers, they would teach that the way to say million in ancient Hebrew was malayawan. And that was obviously them taking a European word borrowed into Hebrew and then throwing a Lashon Kodash pronunciation on it. Million malayawan.
Wait a minute. Okay. Well, isn't there a way to say million in Hebrew?
Yeah, it's million. It's adopted. There's certain European words adopted into Hebrew, and million is one of them. And so they would say, they looked it up in a dictionary, they found million, and they threw their spin on it, and they were teaching that the ICGJC was teaching that. I wouldn't be surprised if we find some of the other camps teaching. If we look at their videos, they were like, yeah, Mala Yawan.
Okay, wow.
But let's get back to the subject. We went. That was some incredible segues.
Illuminati too, because that's where apparently Ricard from GOCC learned his grammar. And here's the Henry McCow book. The minute he mentioned it in the James White debate, I had to get it, man. And it is pretty amazing. There is a section right here where he tries to get into Hebrew, where it says, "Is Lucifer the god of Judaism?" And we got Judah. He's up on here. He says we worship Baphomet. So I think that he might ultimately agree with this. Maybe you should get this, Judah. Do you have Illuminati too? You might appreciate it. You got to get it right there. But it's a pretty funny name, especially the section about God's real name, that's where Ricard draws heavenly from there. And he read this book to Michael Heiser, which somebody mentioned. So what's the next? Oh, can I play more of this video?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm gonna play more of the video right here that we've been talking about right now with Kohen Michael Levy. And here it is.
And amongst the other languages too. No Igbo has no Xhosa has They have different sounds, so you got to go and just be book. You got to be able to different.
Hold on. Something's wrong with my video. Oh no.
No, that's it. That's the end of it. That was the end of it. You only had like 12 seconds left.
I didn't realize we played that much.
Yeah, you played like well over 6 minutes. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
So it's cool.
Good.
It's cool, but it's what's interesting. He mentions Igbo. It's interesting because now a lot of guys, there is sort of a bit of a small crisis within the one Western stream. Crisis is not the right word, but as they evolve, one of the interesting things is that it used to be that they would say they're the Israelites and anyone in Africa is a bunch of dirty Hamites and blah blah blah. But some of them have come to acknowledge, if you're going to say, like it says in Deuteronomy 28, that Israelites have been scattered everywhere, there has to be some Israelites still in Africa. And B, in order for you to say that Israelites came out of West Africa, you sort of have to acknowledge an Israelite presence there. So now some of these groups will say, well, okay, the Igbo or the Igbo are, they're also Israelites, or this group in West Africa is Israelite, the God tribe or something like that. These guys are Israelites, etc. So it's funny because this guy, now he's not a one Wester, so I'm not accusing him of ever using that dirty Hamite talk, the accusing Africans of being quote unquote dirty Hamites. But it's interesting that he sort of fits into that, the Igbo language, so he invokes that. That's a small thing, but it's interesting to note that if you're going to claim Igbos as Hebrew Israelites, and claim that their language has all kinds of Hebrew in it, it does raise a question about, well, what does it say about the Hebrew language? Like, are they under the impression that the language only has one vocalization, and no, the answer is no. And he makes a passing reference to that. But I think we're getting off track there.
Right.
I'm thinking maybe we can segue into the New Testament.
Yeah, so we got 2 videos left, and I feel like I want to wrap up in the next 20 minutes, everybody. So
okay.
we're gonna do these, and this is towards the end. Let me walk this video up and explain why we're gonna play.
Are you gonna do the Commandment Keeper's NT hook? Are you gonna do that one?
You got it.
Okay, good. Now I want people who were watching this video from the beginning to remember the other gentleman when talking about the tribes chart. He said that Bivens used the exact phrase, "That's the hook." Keep that phrase in mind, because this seems to have been a phrase that a lot of these guys were using back in the day. All right, and that's helpful to set up this clip.
All right, here we go.
Oh, no, this isn't it. This isn't. Okay, this is helpful. We can do this one instead.
Wait, you're saying that's not it?
This isn't the one relevant to the hook. This is also relevant to the New Testament. Let this play. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, my bad. I thought this was it. Let me play it then.
Yeah, go ahead.
You say you're in contact with one of his oldest students. He's 90 years old now.
Not Rabbi Matthews, Rabbi Bivens. And Rabbi Bivens, I want to let you know.
He was a rabbi.
Yes, that's what I knew him as, Rabbi Bivens. And that's why I said when I went, that's what he was teaching. Nasi Barak would have known him much better than I.
Yes, he gave me a lot of. Well, and speaking to his oldest student, did he, in your conversations with him, did it ever come to your knowledge that he worshiped Jesus, or was it because the only reason why I'm asking is because these brothers, they're what they call messianic brothers, we're considered non-messianic. Did any of that, was there any did he ever tell you that this is the way that they went going into the New Testament? Was there any?
Simple, easy answer. Absolutely not. Torah founded to this day. You understand Hebrew? No Greek writings is any part of our relationship or discussions. Never. Also, he would always say this to me. We could talk in Hebrew, and he would say he taught Hebrew, but he don't know Hebrew. You understand? Because when it comes to grammar and stuff like that, Dick Duke, he was not versed in that. Like Elder Ari, his oldest surviving students. So that's why I said, but he can talk it. But as I said, he's not going to be able to make those distinguish and go past present and future tense in that but he has a profound knowledge of roots of words.
All right, so that's he's talking about Abba Bivens there. So if Abba Bivens was given the language,
well, here's the thing.
maybe you could say the angel or the man in gray gave him the correct vocalizations for the missing vowels, but that doesn't necessarily mean he would know all the tenses or something like that, right?
Yes, precisely. Although I think he was also talking about Bivens' student. He does get into the Hebrew and talk about how his Bivens' oldest student doesn't really have a good command of Hebrew grammar. But the part that I wanted to get on, so that's relevant to Hebrew, but the part that I wanted to focus on was the thing about the New Testament. So he's referring to a guy who's one of Bivens' students who did not go into the One West Stream, and he doesn't believe in the New Testament. The implication here is that Bivens wasn't really a believer in the New Testament. However, we do have audio clips of Bivens quoting from the New Testament. So there's this potential conflict there. It needs some reconciliation. Did Bivens believe in the New Testament or did he not? This guy seems to be implying that his students, not the One West Stream, but other students who didn't go with One West, that they didn't believe in the New Testament, and so apparently Bivens didn't either. But we have that recording that we played on the dividing line back in summer of 2016 of him quoting at least from the New Testament. So which is it? Here it would be helpful. Oh, you got the chart up there?
Yeah, if everyone, I was going to let everyone see the chart. How do I
zoom in?
Zoom in on a screen.
It depends on what image you're using, what image viewer you're using. That's the problem. Like it's not via the screen. Oh, there you go. Well, anyway.
Wait, hold up. What? Oh, let me try this. I want to see if I can do this.
Okay, no problem.
I want to see if I can zoom in so everyone can see it better. So, oh, there you go. But I'm having trouble kind of guiding it though a little bit. I can zoom in. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I can.
Let me see. Okay, there we go. Is that clear? Okay, that's super. All right, so see everyone at the top, Abba Bivens, because the reason I'm doing this is because we're mentioning some of the students, but the point is not everybody who was a student of his actually ended up a One Wester. That's kind of the point.
That was the thing that we mentioned at the beginning. I'm sorry, I apologize for interrupting you.
No, that's important. So Abba Bivens, now we've mentioned Ahrayah, which remember that's the cursive script name there. Yaquab, who Yaquab is supposed to be Ahrayah's father, and you see that's there. By the way, Abu made this chart, everybody. Abu's the man. And there's Shar, who a lot of people don't really know much about.
He's still with the ICGJC. Shar is still with the ICGJC. He's one of the seven heads. 4 of the 7 heads joined later. They joined later. The original people who started One West were the 3 on the left: Masha, Yaquab, and Ahrayah.
How do you get these pictures of them with these cowboy hats?
I think that was from a previous Passover, so that's them dressing up nice. That's their.
Okay.
You heard of the Sunday best? That's their Pesach best. Their Pesach best.
All right. So then we go down, and then Masha broke away from the ICUPK, formed House of David. So this is here, and then you had Nathaniel was in there, Tahar was in there, Zabak was in there, and they all split off and started their own thing. Nathaniel with IUIC, Tahar with Great Millstone, Zabak with House of Israel. But then this other stream, which was kind of like the original school, ICUPK, which became the ICGJC, and there's a picture of Tazadakia, who took over the school with Ahrayah as an older man who is still alive. And then out of that came Yahanna with the new IUCPK, as well as Rakar Shaya, the one who debated James White. Now, can you real quick explain the significance of relationship to Lashon Qadash, Tazadakia's name, because it has that Taz sound?
Yeah, the Taza sound. The most absurd part of Lashon Qadash is the claim that the Tzadeh is pronounced Taza. And for me, I think the obvious explanation is that whether it was Bivens or Ahrayah, whoever created this, they were taking the transliterations of these Hebrew characters and just throwing an in, the A vowel everywhere, except for in the ayin, The tzadeh, which is a hard S in Semitic languages, like in Arabic, the tzad, it's sad, it's a hard S. And so in Jewish publications, it's usually in the Septuagint, it's rendered just as a sigma, but in Jewish publications, it's treated as it's either transliterated TS or TZ. In the past, TZ was very popular. Now TS. So you look in Jewish publications, whenever they're transliterating or transcribing something with the tzadeh, they'll render it TS or TZ. Now, Bivens or Ahrayah, whoever created this, when they saw 2 consonants in the transcription, they threw in the A sound twice, and they turned the tzadeh, that character, into ta-za, which is the worst of all the pronunciations given in Lashon Qadash. That's the most absurd. It's the most baseless, and it's the biggest piece of evidence that Lashon Qadash is like created by someone who didn't understand Hebrew, didn't understand Semitic languages.
Excellent. All right. Now, I am not sure what this video you were saying you would want me to play previously.
It's called Commandment Keeper's NT hook. Do you have that? It's again with the woman. It's the woman again. There were 2 with the woman. If not, I can play it.
I don't actually see that. No, the only clip I have left is the Jewish wedding one, I think.
We can do that one too. I forgot about that one. Yeah, that one's interesting too. Do you want me to play the one?
Maybe actually, I lost my Jewish wedding one too. I'm not seeing. Oh wait, Bivens' oldest non-One West student, non-NT. Oh, or
that's what you just played. You just played that one. And oh, by the way, the reason that's significant, again, because we sort of segued a bit. The reason that's significant is because, as I was saying, it shows that Bivens' students, at least one, who didn't go into One West, didn't believe in the New Testament. And so the implication seems to be that Bivens didn't believe in the New Testament. But as we said, there is an audio clip that exists, and Bivens does quote Romans in that text. And there's another video of Nasi Barak saying that he saw Bivens pray the Lord's Prayer. So he did deal with the New Testament. So there needs to be reconciliation.
It seems like if we put this all together, that he used it as a hook. Because remember in that other video, the guy's like saying, and I can prove it right there with that book you have,
exactly,
referring to their Bible. And it seems like, and there's another clip. I don't think we're going to play it today, where they're referring to Abba Bivens, and they say he taught the New Testament, but different. It kind of like, but I couldn't tell if they were saying he taught from it as if he believed it, or he just was explaining things from it, But it seemed like some kind of utilitarian use of the New Testament because he knew it was authoritative for Christians. Because we're also not playing this video, but everybody listen. These men talk about Abba Bivens setting up when Christians would be getting out of church and preaching to them right when they were coming out. Like if you guys remember the Malcolm X movie by Spike Lee, how he had the NOI out there, and he would, like, the minute they got released from church, attack Christianity and all that, and that's how they would kind of get a lot of people into their belief system. By the way, you notice a lot of these religious groups, to basically get steam, gain momentum, they have to make as a preoccupation with their polemics to attack Christianity. And then when we holler back at them, they're like, why are you guys picking on us? It's so unfair. You're obsessed. You're racist. But they've been coming at Christianity for years and years. And I'm going to be honest, this is me talking, not my man Abu. He doesn't talk this way. But Hebrew Israelism is a leech off the Christian church. It's a blood-sucking parasite that takes from the Christian church, then claims like they're doing something right. But you take people's belief in the scripture and the Bible that the Christian church has been instilling and teaching to them, and misuse their trust in God's word with your own insane hermeneutic. That's just me talking, but that's the way I feel about it. Now, let me say something real quick before I play this next clip. Actually, the only clip I do got left is the wedding clip. But hey, everybody watching, thank you very much, because I just hit 950 subscribers right now during this broadcast. My man Piccolo, well, could be a female, I don't know, just subscribed. That's 950. We had a goal to hit it before the end of the year. I told everybody if we did, we'd do something special. So this Thursday, I'm going to do something special. On Facebook Live, I'm going to do something totally different out of the norm called Theological Thoughts on Thor on a Thursday. And I'm going to do a video where we analyze some of the theology behind the Thor Ragnarok movie as a special bonus release video treat for y'all because we hit the 950 subscribers. Okay, Abu, what do you want to do right now?
Well, I don't know if you go to your email, I could give you the title of the email where we keep the clip, or I could just play the clip myself since you don't have it. There's a clip titled, let me see what the email is titled.
That's the hook?
That's the hook part 2. Do you have an email titled?
I do. You know why I didn't get it? Because I just saw the page there, and I think I only had downloaded the page. I did with the image of the Commandment Keepers. I think I didn't.
Yeah. Download the video too.
I'll get it right now, then, bro.
And we'll play that one. And this is relevant to the New Testament.
All right, yeah. As soon as it, go ahead.
All right, so let me know as we lead into this video, the two things to keep in mind. One, we're trying to reconcile the thing about, you know, some of the non-One West students of Bivens didn't believe in the New Testament, but Bivens did seem to use the New Testament on occasion. You know, and so we have to reconcile that. You brought up the point that maybe he just used it to, you know, to argue with people or to lead people in. You also brought up the point that that was alluded to in the guy Naphtali ben Naphtali when he said that, Chief of Chiefs, when he said that Bivens would say, I can prove it in that book in your hand, referring to the Bible. So he may have just used it without necessarily endorsing it. Now, as we watch this next clip, remember that phrase that was attributed to Bivens, that's the hook. And again, this is another video from Uziel Lewy. Go ahead.
All right, here we go.
Okay.
So dealing with Commandment Keepers up to Rabbi Bivens and anybody before, after them, what role did the New Testament play in anybody's understanding of being Hebrew?
Now, I'm going to answer a question another way. I wanted to finish with Rabbi Bivens, too. Rabbi Bivens was my father's contemporary. Whether he was actually ordained, that part I don't know. And there's nobody left to tell me. Okay? But he was trained somewhat with them.
And he was called Rabbi.
Yes, he was. I remember that. Through my family, people referred to him as Rabbi. Absolutely.
Yeah, so the question is, what role did the New Testament play, if any, with congregations back then?
Okay. Let me see. Okay, you're talking about the Messianic thing.
And the New Testament in general.
No, the New Testament, we did not study from the New Testament. Some people think that. No. Here's what happened. When Commandment Keepers was first formulated, it was called Commandment Keepers, Ethiopian Hebrew Congregation, Pillar and Ground of Truth, Faith of Jesus Christ. If that's what you people are referring to, people know about that. We don't lie. We don't have to. What that was about is, that was the hook, to bring the people in and teach them the truth. So for some people needed that hook. So if you see that written, and then eventually they did away with that faith of Jesus Christ altogether. Never taught New Testament, never taught. They might have studied New Testament because any intelligent, educated person, you got to know about what's out there. Right. So they, as rabbis, probably studied it. Right, yeah, to be able to counter it. But for them teaching us, the elect, they never taught that. You see how I am? I am a perfect example of what was taught. And I'm the younger. That's right, and I'm the youngest. So you know how much stuff they knew, the ones that's older than me in my family. So no, that was never an issue. That was completely rejected. But like I said, they themselves, I don't know all the rabbinical studies. Had my father been here and I asked him, he'd say, yeah, ... He would explain. Because they study stuff like all spiritual people, leaders do. They study stuff that's not for us. So, but he wouldn't have told me the truth if I asked him. But it was never an issue. So if it was taught, it was only taught among them. I shouldn't even say taught, studied. It might have been studied among them, but never in the congregation. We never used the New Testament.
Very interesting. Abu, is your mic unmuted, my man?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry about that. What I would say is the interesting part, I don't know if you caught it. She said now this is about the Commandment Keepers, but notice she also used the phrase, that's the hook, or that was the hook, she said. Did you catch that?
Yeah.
So this seems to be so we have two things. We have the Commandment Keepers using the name of Jesus and maybe an allusion to the New Testament as, quote, the hook, end quote, to draw people in. We have Bivens, who seems to possibly have been somewhat ambivalent on the New Testament, and separate from that, also using the phrase, that's the hook, at least in reference to his bogus tribes chart. I think both of these can merge together to produce the sense that while he may have been more into the New Testament than the Commandment Keepers, his ambivalence, his apathy towards it was probably inherited from the Commandment Keepers as well. And here's the thing. While people might say, "Oh no, Bivens was into the New Testament because he taught from it," the problem is that the evidence that he did not fully embrace the New Testament is the fact that even long after he was dead, One West had a shaky relationship with the New Testament. they used it more and more to argue their case. They liked using Revelation 1 to try to demonstrate the color of Jesus. But the interesting thing is Ahrayah of Saints of Thunder, a former member of the Sons of Thunder camp, he had pointed out that when people brought the breakdown of the New Testament to Ahrayah, and we've discussed this in previous shows, when they confronted Ahrayah in the 90s with, you know, going through Luke carefully to prove that Jesus was born of a virgin. Now, later on, people developed different responses to this, but Ahrayah's initial response was, Luke is a liar.
Yeah,
that was his response. The Gospel of Luke is lying. And there's other hints of this. There was an old One West breakdown that that James in Acts 15, when he quotes Amos, he quoted it wrong. You know, that James went off, and there's a clip of Tahar teaching that's out there somewhere.
Really?
Yeah, he says Tahar still taught that. He goes, I'm sorry, James went off when that the Apostle James broke down the book of Amos wrong. He didn't know it like the way Tahar does. But then there's also
hey. Well, he always said it was an epistle of straw, right?
Yeah, there you go. Well, no, but he was referring to Acts, the Apostle James in Acts.
I know.
Yeah, I know. Yep. So then there's that. Then there's another one is also in Luke. The thing about Ahrayah saying that Ahrayah said Luke is a liar. Keep in mind that for a long time, One West, when they would deal with the verse in Luke 3, and I believe Nathaniel still teaches this, that when Luke 3 says that Joseph was supposed the father of Christ, they claim that was added to the text. That's an interpolation, as was supposed. And they base this not on any Greek manuscript evidence, they base it entirely on the parentheses in an English translation. The relevance here is that One West's acceptance of the New Testament evolved over time. The evidence of that is very clear. The ICJJC reached the point where they accepted all of it, to the point that they even accept the Comma Johannium. I've seen the ICJJC try to use the Comma Johannium against people. So they embrace the entire New Testament, but that's not something that goes back to Abba Bivens. There was a slow acceptance of it. As late as the 90s, you had people like Ahrayah himself still rejecting parts of the New Testament. And I think that in itself is evidence that Bivens himself, much like the Commandment Keepers in an earlier version of itself, used the New Testament as, quote, the hook, as a hustle, a gimmick to draw people in.
Yeah, somebody asked, I wonder if they have other hooks.
Probably. We're still learning, obviously.
All right. And then, well, I know that GMS, I don't know if they have hooks, but they have hookahs.
Oh, God. Yeah, that's pretty bad. That's,
actually, for real, speaking of Abba Bivens, I heard he had a pretty nasty right hook.
Yes, yeah, that's the legend, that he had knocked people out, but his penchant for street fighting unfortunately did him in as he got older. But oh well, you know.
Right. Somebody says, oh yeah, the 12 tribes chart was another hook. So good, people are catching on. And then somebody says, there goes the hook again. Sadly, it worked. Another person says the hook knocked the sense out of most of them.
Oh, but this also draws us into another thing with the 12 tribes chart. Remember what that guy said? He said that was used as just a hook back in the day. Yeah. But then he said after Bivens died, they started teaching it as if it was the truth. It seems that his stance on the New Testament may have paralleled that pattern. He was ambivalent. He was apathetic about the New Testament. But over time, the people who claim to carry on his legacy have come to teach it in its entirety as the truth, at least for the most part. Certainly the ICGJC reached that point where they embraced the entire King James New Testament. And the rest of them are very close. I mean, there's very little in the New Testament that someone like Nathaniel Ahrayah would reject. You know, it's probably just that part of Luke 3, I'm guessing.
I'm going to have to watch this video, but I just noticed a video from June 11, 2017, which says, it's by Yashamar Israel, and it says, elders confirm ISUPK lied on Abba Bivens.
I think what that's going to be is, that's the thing, other people who have also appreciate the recent research of Uziel Lewy, they're also getting into the question, they're exploring specifically the question of Abba Bivens in the New Testament.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So we're not the first to touch on this. Since Uziel Lewy got into this subject, a lot of people, not a lot, but there have been other people who have been intrigued by what it says about the historical narrative. Now, it's funny enough, that video is accusing ISUPK of lying. in this video, before you even knew about that video, you yourself said that we can't accuse these gentlemen of lying. I think people like Yahanna, and then even outside of the ISUPK, people like Tahar, the narrative that they've handed it down sincerely, but they themselves may have been deceived by Ahrayah. They may have received a distorted narrative.
Yeah. Just so everyone knows, that they want to hear some of what we're referring to, there's videos out there called Abba Bivens Part 1, ABBA-BIVENS PT1. They're on a channel called GMS Old School with a K 2. So GMS Old School, SKOOL 2. And there's a Part 1, a Part 2, a Part 3. They're like 10 minutes clips, I think, each. And there's another one also under GMS LA. Well, actually, GMS La Yashaya. Elder High Priest Abba Bivens Part 1. Looks like it actually is a mirror of the same one. But
Yeah.
So there are some of those. The audio is kind of rough on those, but just so everyone knows.
Real quick, can you show that very short clip, the one about the Jewish wedding? We can close with that. Because it's not entirely relevant to this discussion, but it can be relevant to a future discussion. And it also has relevance to how much Bivens reflected the Commandment Keepers. Because something you know well from your own research on the Commandment Keepers is that they apparently had two stances vis-a-vis the mainstream Jews, especially Ashkenazi Jews, that on the one hand, they would work with Ashkenazi Jews and be very friendly with them and treat themselves as equals, but behind closed doors, they would call them imposters and stuff like that. Bivens may have been playing the same game, preaching hatred of Ashkenazis out of one side of his neck, but then sort of still, mixing with them. And and this is something that's been transmitted on as well, because, for example, Qadash, you may recall, he told the story about how he attended a House of David wedding, that Masha was there, and that when someone got married, Masha was yelling Mazel Tov and stomping on a glass and all this, like his sort of rabbinic past sort of like crept up, like his influence with rabbinic Judaism was still there in a pronounced way. And so what this clip is going to show, that just as Wentworth Matthews may have taken two tracks, to his congregation, tearing down Ashkenazi Jews, but then also working with them and showing them a different face, Abba Bivens may have been the same way. So again, this is, of the various people that Uziel Lewi interviewed, he's the one who knew Abba Bivens the best. He was at his school for a while. He also influenced that school, bringing, for example, the turban and other things from B'nai Zachem. So listen to what he says about towards the end of his relationship with Bivens.
Right.
Remember, this is supposed to be Bivens who hates mainstream Jews.
Right. So this is all significant. Hold on, let me get it set up here. All right, everybody, here is this clip. All right.
A Jewish people wedding. Yeah, but it broke my heart. You go for the Shabbat. It's good to go to a Jewish wedding. That's when I said, no, I'm going there. He tried to convince me, I don't know. That's okay, man. You do what you have to do. You know what I mean?
What is he saying? After he's saying, is that what he's saying? He stopped associating with them, or what is he saying there? He says, like, that's when I stopped.
Yeah, he's insinuating that that's when he was pretty much done with them. He's that Bivens broke his heart and he was kind of done with it. It was towards the end of Bivens as well. But what it shows is that on the one hand, you have people who never met Bivens, the one Westers, telling us that he was just straight up and down a hater of the mainstream Jews, what they would say are the counterfeit Jews. But a guy who actually met him recalls that even towards the end of their relationship, he was still associating with mainstream Jewish groups. So much like Wentworth Matthews, there may have been these two faces, these two different stances, friendly when around the Jews, but hostile to them when they're not around the mainstream Jews, hostile to his congregation behind closed doors, or, when they're not around, but when he could, I don't know, maybe try to get something out of them. And a lot of these groups were like that. It's not just Wentworth Matthews. A lot of these groups were like that,
Right. I'm trying to look for the section of that book where they talk about Matthews doing the same thing. I can't find it right now. But, hey, you looking through the comments, do you see anything else, brother, that you want to comment on?
No, I'll just say this. I think we should close it up. It's been a pretty long video. I will say this. We may do future videos. We're continuing to research this subject, continuing to try to understand it. We've, over the time, it's very difficult to get a better understanding of One West. One speculative track that we're possibly going to chase down is the rumor that Bivens' family, because by the way, that video of Chief of Chiefs, Naphtali ben Naphtali, he talks about how the attitude about the tribes chart changed after Bivens' own family left the school or passed away. So even his family was different from the One West stream. He alludes to that guy, one of the first clips we showed. And I mentioned that because there's a rumor out there. A lot of people will say they never heard this rumor before. Others will say they heard it, but it's nonsense. There's a rumor out there that Bivens' family went closer into mainstream Judaism. I don't know if you caught that. I think you're muted right now.
Yeah, I did. Sorry, the dog was barking. I was just
understood. No problem.
Tell him to shut up. All right, so well, I can't find this page, but it's in an old school book by Howard Bratz where he talks about the Matthew's doing the same type of thing. So I think this.
Did you catch what I said at the end when you were dealing with the puppet?
Bivens' family went into traditional Judaism?
This is a rumor. This is a rumor, but it becomes a bit more plausible when we see now that Bivens, even towards the end of his life, might have been playing the same two-faced game that Matthews was playing. There's a rumor out there that Bivens, some of his family members who were in the school, they went a different direction and continued to be friendly with mainstream Judaism. And it's an interesting rumor because it's very convoluted. But like, for example, there was another family of what we would say what popularly would be called Black Jews or African Americans within New York who either practiced Judaism or were Israelites. There was another family called Bivens with a double B. And some people will say, no, that was a different family, not related to Abba Bivens. There's people out there that are saying, no, the Bivens family with a B, Bibbins, was actually his family. And whether or not that's true, there's also that family did get very close with mainstream Judaism in the late 60s and early 70s. And second, there's other people out there that are claiming that some of Bivens' own family, a brother, a son, they themselves got closer with mainstream Judaism as well. I just wanted to mention that because seeing that thing that we just saw, that last clip, right now it's entirely in the stage of rumor. We're trying to chase down something more solid, but that might come up in a future discussion. I just wanted to put that out there. Right now, it's very speculative. It's dealing in very foggy rumors.
Biblios, you're asking about if we could discuss more of the rabbinic influences on Abba Bivens. We can't do that tonight, but we did that exact thing for like an hour and a half on a program that we did on the dividing line. Can you tell people? I'm going to show a screen share of that. Could you tell people a little bit about that?
It was a dividing line episode from the summer of 2016. It was called something like Judaism's Influence on the Hebrew Israelites or something like that.
Yeah, I'm bringing it up right now so people can see it. Yeah, okay.
And so we get into that. We get into some of the possible. Well, clearly, just the way he was dressed in that picture we showed you, he's wearing a prayer shawl. He's wearing a Sephardic mitznefet, which is like a distinctly Sephardic cap. Literally, mitznefet means something like turban or something like that, but it's more of a cap. But what he was wearing showed a rabbinic influence. Even the phrase Lashon Kodesh is the proper pronunciation. That's taken from rabbinic literature. The concept of using that phrase to represent the pure language vis-a-vis modern Israeli Hebrew is also something taken from rabbinic Judaism. And just the Commandment Keepers. Vocab showed that picture from of the Commandment Keepers from Jacob Dorman's Chosen People at the beginning of this video. And that was, here you go. Judaism's influence on the Hebrew Israelites. And we get into all of that. We also talk about very briefly, the Moorish Zion Temple and how there was, we can't prove that it was Abba Bivens himself, but there was ironically a Bivens family that lived right next door to the Moorish Zion Temple. And the Moorish Zion Temple was heavily influenced by Rabbinic Judaism. They had an Israeli flag out. They had Yiddish, literal Yiddish, on their sign outside. They had the word Talmud written in their window. They were very, and of course they had the prayer shawls and the Sephardic mitznefet cap and all that. So all these guys were influenced by Rabbinic Judaism, and that's sort of acknowledged. I believe Tahar of GMS, he came out with a video responding to us saying, that this was explained to him and that, they had to go that route to find some of their heritage, and then they figured out the truth after the fact. But yeah, there was a heavy rabbinic influence in many respects, and some of that is carried over to this day. But when you go deeper into the history, when you get back to people like Matthews and Bivens, you see that the rabbinic influence is much more pronounced.
Right, and we had somebody earlier who was asking us if we could talk a little bit about Moorish temple science, you know, and yeah, we just can't do it tonight though anymore about those topics because we want to wind down now. But hey, I think this show went great. We're gonna do stuff like this again as more information comes out. And I heard that Divine Prospect, while we're doing this, is doing a stream of his own where he's still talking about Matthew 28:19, even though he wouldn't debate me on it. I asked him if he would debate specifically on this question: is Matthew 28:19 an addendum to the text? He will not debate on it, but yet this is what, the fourth video he's made. They're like 2.5 hours long. I mean, if you guys want me to respond to him in detail, I can, if you guys have seen these, because I watched it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so bad. Like, I could literally not put any slides together, not prepare for anything, just watch his video, pause it, and then correct his errors, and then hit play. I could do a running commentary. I'm going to nickname him Mr. Mistake a Minute, because as he speaks, the faster he speaks and the more he says, he makes some kind of error, a factor interpretation almost every minute. Like, so I know this is off the topic, but I saw what's going on, so I'm going to maybe go check that out right now if you guys are interested in doing something, although they kind of kick you out if you talk over there. But I'm going to watch it and see, and let me know at some point if you guys are interested, if you want to have me respond to some of this, because, you know, Abu, you watched the Divine Prospect, some of the stuff on Matthew 28:19, right?
A little bit, yeah. I remember I got to see a little bit of his stuff on he even tries to attack Bart Ehrman, and it's a really, the little bit that I saw was a really gross attack. It sort of missed the context of a correspondence that somebody posted, and it really misrepresented Ehrman's position and tried to treat him as like ignorant of manuscripts that are fragmentary or something to that effect. And
yeah,
I saw that, and it kind of, I'm not trying to disrespect Divine Prospect, Ron Shields, I believe his name is. I think he's a very intelligent young man, and you know, I respect what he does, even if I disagree sharply with him. But the little bit that I saw from that did leave much to be desired. You know, that's the politest way I can put it. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but yeah, I think there's a lot that could be said from the little bit that I saw from that video.
Excellent, man. Well, I appreciate you as usual, bro. And I think this is a great show. Thanks for all the hard work you do. And right now I'm going to close the show out. I've finally figured out how to actually show videos a lot better. So I'm going to close out with the intro to this show. Enjoy it. God bless y'all. Peace out. Good job, Abu. Have a good one, y'all.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're now listening to Defend and Protect. Defend and Protect. Defend and Protect. Defend and Protect. Defend and